Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 5 of What If Naruto Was in Game of Thrones. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Release me. Aerys Targaryen howled those words alongside a slew of obtuse obscenities and other vile vitriol that shan't be spoken within these pages at his captors as he threw a fresh fit and flailed against his restraints. All for naught. His shackles held, and he succeeded only in smashing his already wounded face against an unyielding bars of his cell, injuring himself yet further. Although he was lacking a leg and an arm besides, he had nevertheless been chained to the wall in a humiliating fashion and left to rot in the dark with naught but a single torch hung before his face. All the while, he seethed. Did they have any idea who he was? He was the king, he was the dragon. And yet, they had caged him like some common pauper. The gall of it all. To make matters worse, his captors had struck him across the face, cut his beard, then lopped off his ring finger for good measure, signet ring and all, to be sent back to King's Landing as a warning. Perhaps for ransom, likely the latter, he mused in a fleeting moment of lucidity. And still this infernal itching persisted. He could not even scratch himself with his bloody hand, for that hand was bound, and there was no one left in his retinue to attend to him. They were all dead, servants and knights all, Esser Gawain the Gaunt and Esser Jonathor Derry with them, slain in coldest blood when they moved to defend him. That left his remaining Kingsguard at a mere 4 now, since the untimely mysterious death of Esser Oswell went to illness a year prior and the disappearance of Prince Lewin Martell not a year before that. Now only Esser Arthur Dane, Esser Gerald Hightower, Esser Barristan Selmy, and last of all, certainly least in his addled mind, that pesky Lannister pup, Esser Jaime, yet remained. Useless, the lot of them. Couldn't do a damn thing unless he told them to. He tried to distract himself with those of his remaining guard, but that only left him further incensed. Traitors and turncoats everywhere he looked, failures within and without, even in death they disobeyed. This was all their fault. Duskendale. Accursed Duskendale. Damnable, detestable Duskendale. Dennis Darkly had personally invited him to come to his keep to hear his petition, and like any good mad king, he had graciously granted his request. Yes, he'd come here in good faith, only to be promptly set upon by archers and knights the moment he and his were through the gates. His men lay dead in the yard, swords and crossbow bolts in their backs before they even knew what was happening. Then he was taken. Now here he lay, imprisoned, going madder by the moment. He was loath to admit it, but perhaps Tywin had been right after all. He was a fool to come here with naught but 2 Kingsguard and a few attendants. Perhaps he should have abstained. Unless... Was Tywin in league with them? The mastermind behind this scheme? The lion in sheep's clothing? Yes, of course, it all made sense now. This must be his doing. It had to be. The lion sought to remove the dragon from the board. He would accept no other explanation. A fresh paroxysm of agony jarred him back to reality most forcefully, reminding him of his torment and prompting another burst of festering rage. I am the king, he howled, spittle spraying from yellow teeth. I demand you release me at once. As though spurred by that very thought, the shadows seemed to come alive for a moment, and he could have sworn he saw countless eyes peering at him from the dark, limned by the torchlight. Green eyes. Lannister eyes. Treacherous lion eyes. A man walked out of the shadows wearing a familiar face. Tywin's face? No, that wasn't quite right. Its features were indistinct. It both was and was not Tywin, but rather who he had once been. A younger man, a warmer man, back when things made sense, when life was so much simpler. He'd truly gone insane, hadn't he? The ghost of his past smiled as it strode towards Aerys. When it spoke, its voice rippled through the halls of his memory. Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king. I thought you would have learned that by now, my old friend. Men did not walk out of shadows, even he wasn't so far gone as to think that. No, the king shied away from him, trying to shield his with his remaining hand and failing miserably. You're not here, you're hiding under Castle Rock. You can't be here, you're not real. The specter paused before him. Whether I am real or not is immaterial, the fault remains your own. You've blundered into this trap of your own accord, Aerys. Blast, it even sounded like Tywin. Rage bubbled up in his heart at the implication. Aerys snarled and spat at him, lone eye squinting into the gloom. Mine, this is your doing. It's easy to blame me for everything these days, isn't it? As he looked on, his worst friend turned fear began to walk circles around him, hands clasped behind his back. If the taxes aren't done properly, blame Tywin. If your son can't find a bride, blame Tywin. If the realm rebels, blame Tywin. He chuckled darkly, as the true Tywin never would. But I had no part in this, Aerys. I had nothing to do your body failing you, nor was I involved with the Darklands, though, I admit, he thumbed his chin, considering, my house will certainly benefit from their stupidity. You, however. Tywin struck like a snake and closed the distance between them in an instant. A spectral hand seized Aerys' ruined face and began twisting it from left to right, inspecting his disfigured visage as a butcher might a pig before slaughter. Or a lion about to put a dying dragon out its misery. He'd never been one to mince words. At length, he scoffed and released him. You will die down here, Aerys. The king stilled. If this was his own maddened mind telling him of his doom, he didn't want to hear it. It will not be swift, nor will it be pleasant. Yet the ghost of former friend continued, unabated. If your illness doesn't take you, then I expect the torturer's tools will. You'll likely lose some more fingers before the deed is done. Perhaps your tongue. Aerys hung his head and screamed anew into the floor. Tywin tutted at him, just as he had that one time he found him passed out with those whores on the street of Silk. Best do that while you still can. You were a poor man, a poor king, and your son will never so much as touch the Iron Throne one. He will die, as will your wife, and any hope of your future. The Targaryens shall cease to exist by year's end, all because of you. The realm will move on, and you will be forgotten, like every other mad king before you. Aerys began to weep into the flagstones. Tywin quirked a leonine brow down at him, his scorn palpable. Really, now, tears, from you, compose yourself. You are the king, for however many days you have left. The least you can do is die with dignity, not in a puddle of tears and your own excrement. Aerys wailed incoherently. Tywin sighed. I shall leave you to it, then. A hand patted his head, brushing his thinning hair in a parting caress. Farewell, old friend, we won't meet again. Aerys surged upright in a fit of panic, sanity peeking through curtains of his madness. Tywin, no, don't leave me alone, not in his wretched place. When he looked up, Tywin was nowhere to be seen. Long gone, or rather, he had never been. Something cracked in the back of his addled mind, like broken stained glass beneath a hammer. Aerys slumped against his chains and began to snicker. Cackle. Giggle, now. Seconds bled into minutes after that, and soon hours became days. He had no way of knowing how much time passed, but with it, his tenuous grasp on reality became more untethered by the moment. Fact and fiction began to blur even further. Misery bled into mania as the rats nibbled at his toes and lice infested his hair. He ate bread when it was given to him and drank water, each provided once a day. He was being kept alive, but only just, and for what, he knew not. All the while, rage burned within him. Burn them all. Burn. Yes, that was what he would do once he escaped from this place. Burn them in their homes, burn them in their beds, burn them until they were dead. No, even after they were dead. Burn their bones. Even when his jailers finally grew weary of his ranting and gagged him forcing a wet sock into his mouth, he continued to rant and rage. Aerys howled angrily against the gag. MRRRM. HRRRM. MHRRRMMMPH. He would burn them all. Burn them. All. Tilda. King Aerys has been kidnapped. To call what followed calm would have been a farce. It was anything but. Chaos ensued. Everyone started shouting. Tywin, to his credit, weathered this storm as he had done so countless before. He stood fall, hands clasped behind his back, face outwardly reflecting none of the concern he felt within as everyone railed at him, demanding explanations. Was he not upset? Was he not concerned? Was he not alarmed? Foolishness. Of course he was concerned. How could he not be? The timing of Aerys' disappearance was inopportune at best, downright disastrous at worst. So many of his plans hinged on having his former friend still sitting the Iron Throne when the rebellion began. For that sorry sod to simply vanish from King's Landing and be kidnapped by parties unknown was concerning, to say the last. Should the old fool manage to get himself killed, Rhaegar would ascend to take his place, and that, as a Tully would say, was an entirely different kettle of fish. Aerys could not be allowed to perish just yet. Rhaegar was infinitely more capable than his father, and moreover, well liked by the realm. It was one thing for a lion rebel against a diseased dragon stricken by madness, and another matter entirely to face one in its prime. Tywin knew how the mind of Aerys worked. He could even predict the crazed king, to an extent. Despite his madness, he had been a decent, if eccentric man, once upon a time. Once. Now he was a mad thorn in his side. one who delighted in tormenting him at every turn. The sooner he plucked him, killed his son, and planted Nathaniel atop the Iron Throne with Rhaella as queen to legitimize his rule the better. Rhaegar would be far harder to dislodge should he ever rise to kingship and therefore, mustn't be allowed to ascend in the first place. Some might say such thoughts were treacherous. Perhaps they were. What of it? Tywin had been loyal, a good friend, and what did that friendship gain him? Misery. Aerys had betrayed him long ago, first with the horrors he inflicted upon Rhaella, then in trying to take Joanna from him, and in countless acts of petty spite since. Such were the acts of neither friend nor a king, but a madman jumping at shadows. History was littered with countless corpses like his, each mad or cruel in their own way. Maegor, Baelor, Aegon the Unworthy, to name a few. Aerys would join them in due time, but such an effort would take time and they must be careful in the meantime. Which meant not rushing headlong into a trap without proper preparation. Nathaniel and his prospective brides-to-be did not understand this, they possessed neither the age nor the experience that he did. They were angry, confused, demanding answers, lost in the heat of the moment. It was understandable, they were young and passion ran hot in them. As such, waited until they'd shouted themselves hoarse. Only then did he speak. As Hand of the King, I have been recalled to the Red Keep by the Queen to remedy this indiscretion until such a time as the King is found. He looked to his son. Nathaniel will accompany me. Even the dragons seemed to take silent note of those words, he had no doubt the intelligent beasts understood them. Nathaniel, for his part, clapped a hand to his forehead and sighed, utterly incredulous. Why? Tywin baited the hook. Rhaella was insistent. All semblance of protest died. The ladies looked amongst themselves and muttered crossly at the mention of her grace, but that was undoubtedly the ghost of a smile upon his heir's proud visage just now. He had no doubt the young man would accept the queen's command, if only to finally meet her in the flesh after all these years. Might he have something to do with this? Tywin studied his son's face for any sign of deception and found none. He didn't think Nathaniel would or could conspire to kidnap the king, but he had been away dealing with the last lingering Ironborn raiders. He wouldn't put it past him to try something, not with everything he'd inflicted upon Aerys already. But no, his son looked just as shocked as the rest. He clearly wasn't a part of this. Joanna elbowed him ever so gently, preventing him from getting lost in his thoughts once again. And well that he didn't at that, because the Stark girl was about to make quite a scene. Lyanna had stepped to Nathaniel's side and seized his right hand. I will go. Elia stepped to his side and latched onto his left. As shall I. Brave girls, brave, but also very foolish. You will do no such thing. He cut the legs out from under their argument with a quelling look before their words could take root. The queen asked for Nathaniel and I alone. Furthermore, neither of you can be seen at his side in court. Rhaegar will surely attempt to take one of you. Lyanna and Elia looked to one another and blanched. Cersei took the opportunity to wrap both arms around Nathaniel from behind. Placing her chin upon her brother's shoulder, she opened her mouth to protest. Joanna rounded on their daughter with a stern scowl. No. Cersei closed her mouth, released Nate, and stepped back. Truly, his wife could command their daughter in ways he could not. Tyrion chuckled ruefully. He has you there, sister. Cersei glowered green daggers at him. If looks could kill, his youngest son would be a pile of smoldering ash upon the floor. You cannot go for your own safety, dear ones. Joanna deftly snatched the reins of the conversation from him as she stepped to their son and reached out, carefully disentangling him from the trio of troublesome maidens one by one. Rhaegar aside, someone must remain here and look after the dragons. No. Lyanna stomped a foot sullenly. Anyone can do that. Not just anyone, Joanna corrected her gently, steering the conversation toward her desired outcome. Your dragon only listens to you, does he not? The same can be said for Elia and Cersei. Your beasts are young. They will surely rebel if you leave them unattended. They may get hurt, or worse, accidentally reveal themselves to the world. Is that what you want? Tyrion can watch them. Elia shrugged one shoulder. The lizards like him, mostly. The boy scoffed. While I appreciate the vote of confidence, I'd rather not become Dragon Chow. Seemed his son had a spine. Good, he'd need it in the coming days. But Joanna had found an opening now, and like any Lannister, she pressed it ruthlessly. Do you have such little faith in Nathaniel? The trio shook their heads. Then trust in him. He's defied worse odds before, has he not? Nathaniel, for his part, wisely kept his mouth shut and let Joanna talk, no doubt realizing what she was planning. In no time at all, she managed to talk them down. Kurama huffed audibly, expelling smoke from his nostrils. Clearly he understood her aim. For once, Tywin found himself inclined to agree with the dragon. His wife had a way with words that he did not. Sure enough, the girls eventually subsided with mutinous looks. He would have them watched tonight but didn't deny her words. But then, just when he thought the matter settled, Nymeria stepped up silently, hands clasped at her waist. She said nothing to Tywin, she simply stared. He immediately made to refute her as well out of habit, then paused and reconsidered her. No, not just her, but rather the peerless potential possessed. Having a faceless girl, now a woman, among their retinue would be beneficial. If things went south, as he suspected might, she would be another sword to cut them a path to freedom. Or a shield for his son. He did not say such things aloud, naturally. Nate might take offense to the idea of losing one of his lady loves. Very well, he granted her a grim nod of acceptance. You may accompany us. Nymeria bowed her head and sketched a curtsy. She'd gotten better at those. Thank you, my lord. Cersei threw an absolute fit. Then I shall go as well. Tywin rounded on her with an aggravated growl, his patience at an end. Will you, now, and do you also possess the means to change your face at will? Can you throw a dagger like an arrow? Slit a man's throat before he knows you're there? No. When his daughter flushed, he pressed his advantage. Then the matter is closed. You will remain here with Lyanna and Elia. She balled her fists and railed at him. This is unfair. Life is unfair, he thundered back at her, bringing her up short with a steely glare. If you lack the strength to pursue your goals, then strive to acquire it. I have acquired it. I've been training. She slashed a hand through the air at him, teeth bared in a rare snarl of defiance. But it's never enough, father. Not for you, ever. The words hit closer to home than he would have liked. Reflexively, his face closed down and he walled himself off from her. Guards, my daughter is tired. See her to her chambers. As ever, the silent guards of the stone garden nodded and moved to flank Cersei. For what little good it did, she snarled at them and stomped toward the stairs, skirts swirling. Tywin suspected he'd have to seal her in her room tonight lest she do something reckless. God save him from wild daughters. At length, he looked to Nathaniel, idly noting that his son had followed Cersei's departure with a wistful expression. Best put a stop to that. There would be no heartfelt goodbyes there. Not tonight. Pack your things, he commanded, drawing an incredulous look from his heir. We ride within the hour. Not true technically, but he didn't wish to give him and Cersei the chance to conspire something. The journey will take some time. I do not expect it to be a quick one. He injected a not so subtle warning in that. There was no need to rush, not just yet. What was important was that they were seen leaving Castle Rock with all due haste. The dawn would come soon. It would be a bitterly cold ride so early in the morn, but a necessary one. If the spider had any of his little birds in the rock, he would report that they'd left almost immediately upon receiving the raven and no one would be the wiser. Nathaniel, for his part, finally voiced the thoughts on his mind. It could be a trap. It very well could, yet we've no choice but to spring it. To refuse the Queen's command would see us branded as traitors. His heir laughed ruefully as he scratched his cheek. Yeah, she'd be pretty angry if we refused. Angrier at you, I'd wager. Belatedly, he remembered another, smaller scroll that had come with the Queen's pleading missive, one directed to Nathaniel, one he'd not yet opened. It had been a rare moment of decency on his part, if only because he suspected what said scroll contained. Here, he passed it off to his still chuckling son. Her Grace directed this to you. Nathaniel opened it and the laughter immediately lodged in his throat. He stood there, reading its contents for the better part of a minute, and made not a sound. Tywin had an inkling why. As he looked on, his son's face flushed a brilliant shade of Lannister red to the very tips of his ears. Joanna noticed and a slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. Don't keep us in suspense, dear. What does it say? Their son coughed into a fist, averting his gaze. She asks that I arrive with all due haste. Her grin grew. Surely it says more than that. Nathaniel promptly hid the letter behind his back, but that only exposed it to Nymeria's questing eyes. She darted in like her namesake, plucked it from his grasp, then skittered backward out of reach before he could think to stop her. Naturally that meant Lyanna and Elia had to take a peek, and in no time at all, the three of them were crooning over its contents like the trio of lovelorn maidens they were. Oh, my. That clever minx. She's not even trying to be subtle anymore. Nathaniel complained and tried to wrest it from their grasp, only for the ladies to pass it among themselves, giggling. In shorter order, his son found himself teased incessantly as they recited verses from what, apparently was a rather pretty poem of all things. She called you her lion, her dearest, her one true love. After a letter like that, I want to bed her myself. I can't even be angry with her. A curious pang tugged at Tywin's heart. Oh, Rhaella, even after all these years she still loved her poetry. Joanna sidled up to him as the quartet squabbled amongst themselves, likely intending to get a look at the letter herself later, and laid a pale hand on his arm for comfort. Surely it won't be just the two of you. Nymeria coughed pointedly behind her, drawing a bemused laugh from his wife. Three, rather, she amended ruefully with a glance her way. You'll be taking a great risk as it is, and to go alone. Certainly not. He was no fool. They'd bring a score of guards with them. Not mere bannermen, mind you. Proper knights and warriors of Castle Rock, all. Good men, loyal men, strong men. A few hundred would do. Not enough to empty the rock of all her defenses, but enough to see them protected if this was in fact some mad scheme by Aerys. But, if by some chance, this was a genuine plea for help from Rhaella. If Aerys truly had been taken by some unknown entity. If King's Landing was truly vulnerable. Then there was only one thing for it. The lion would pounce. Tilda. From her window, Cersei saw a great host ride away from Castle Rock in the cold dawn light. She settled down to watch, chin in her hands, a lone tear rolled down her cheek. Be safe, foolish little brother. Tilda. They made good time. Not stupendous time or magnificent time by any means, just good. Not nearly good enough for Naruto's liking, but time all the same. It galled him to move so slowly, when he knew could rush to the capital himself, but he understood the necessity of it all. If he would rush there, himself, he might be. Well, not captured. He wasn't a fool, but it would certainly cause a stir, and right now he didn't need the extra attention. In truth, he would have preferred a full-on sprint, but they simply couldn't reach King's Landing in a day. He'd long since grown accustomed to moving at his own pace, but marching with an armed force posed challenges of its own, logistics and the like. He understood the reason they were bringing this many men, better safe than sorry, but horses could only move so fast before they dropped dead. Since they hadn't exactly planned for this summons, there were no rest stops with fresh steeds for them, which hobbled them further still. They made camp that night just shy of the Westerlands come nightfall, and what a camp it was. No mere campfires and sleeping on the ground for the lords of Lannister, no, no, no. As he looked on and helped in some cases, a number of large red-on-gold tents were soon erected, and much to his annoyance, his was one of the largest. Proper posh, Clegane had remarked upon the sight of it, and he found himself inclined to agree. Now Tywin faced him across a table yet again, leaving two of them poring over a map once more in the flickering candlelight. He would have found it nostalgic if he weren't so distracted at the moment. Because you see, Nymeria had found yet another new face for herself. In place of her normal visage and pale locks, she donned the likeness of a pale maiden with long ebony hair and bewitching blue eyes. Blue eyes. He didn't want to know where she'd gotten that face from. Some things were better left unknown. What was the saying Cersei had grown so fond of these last 2 years? Take refuge in audacity. Yes, that was the one. It was a lovely disguise, perhaps even too much so. One of the lads had already tried to pay for her services and received a black eye for his trouble. She'd not left his side since. Not that he blamed her. If things went poorly, these might be their last days together. And she was no one's whore. Her eyes caught his, glinting in the candlelight as she shot him a lopsided smile. Her arms tightened around him, a reminder that she had him all to herself. No Lyanna nor Elia and Cersei to share him with. The last time they'd truly been alone was the famed drowning of the Greyjoys. Yes, the bloody massacre of an entire noble house at the hands of a Lannister had once more inexplicably found its way into song, and they'd seldom had proper pillow talk since. He couldn't blame her for being frisky. Pay attention. Tywin, apparently, could. The pointed rebuke snapped Naruto back to attention faster than any blow, sharper than any blade. Tywin never needed to strike his children. His words and his approval were weapon enough. Nymeria made a point of holding on to him regardless. Tywin tutted and shook his head, but didn't demand that she release him. He almost thought he glimpsed a faint smile there upon his face, flickering in the candlelight. Worse than I was with your mother. Nymeria huffed. He was mine first. So you say. However, there is a time and place for such things. Control yourself, or I shall see the two of you separated for the duration of this journey." She subsided with a sigh. "Understood, my lord." Father looked back to him, eyes sharp. "You understand the plan, then?" Naruto chucked, hiding a smile behind another drink of watered-down wine. It warmed his blood, but wasn't enough to dull his thoughts. "Not yet, at least. Naturally, if we're ambushed on the road to King's Landing, I'm to take half of the men and ride back to Castle Rock with all due haste, garrison it against our enemies, and call our banners." "And if we aren't attacked?" Tywin pressed, making certain he understood. Naruto rolled his eyes. "Then our troops will garrison in the Red Keep until such a time as they needed to be thrown against whomever took Aris. We've been over this." A rare look of approval flickered across his father's face. "You've thought this through, then?" "Of course I have." He took another drink to settle his nerves. "This is all I've been thinking about since sunrise." At his arguing, they'd brought some 300 men, with accompanying servants and supplies besides. The armies of King's Landing easily outnumbered their current force by large, but then again, they weren't here to take King's Landing now, were they? As such, they were arriving as friends. The gates would open wide to them. They would be hailed as heroes, those who answered the Queen's call and came to aid her in her darkest hour. Had they intended to sack the city, they could easily do so. But they wouldn't. This time. Tywin was Hand of the King. In the absence of Aerys, he commanded true power in the capital, with Rhaella after him as queen. Rhaegar, wherever he was, whatever he was up to, would have a say in matters naturally, but it wouldn't be the final say. No, that fell too. Nathaniel. He blinked, shaking the cobwebs out of his head. Maybe the wine was affecting him after all, because he hadn't realized Tywin father was staring at him with such an expectant expression. "Heed my words," he cautioned him. "Rhaella has ever been a passionate woman. Aerys may have quenched her fire for a time, but you, I believe, have banked her coals and reignited her flame. If you wish to take her once we reach the city, now is the time to say so." Nymeria tensed against him. Heat speared up the back of Naruto's neck like wildfire. He'd rather bathe in the substance than have this conversation, least of all with Nymeria present, but needs must, he supposed. "What you're suggesting?" Tywin silenced him with a query of his own. "Do you love her?" "Yes, undoubtedly." The reply came immediately. "Don't think for a moment that I feel otherwise." He was, well, fond of Rhaella. She'd been one of the first he truly revealed himself to in his entirety, memories and all, with Nymeria taking a close second. Lyanna and the rest had come after. Even now he sensed a kindred spirit in her, one longing to be free from the cycle of suffering she'd been trapped in, a bird longing to break free of her cage. And he would set her free, one way or another. Even if he had to burn down the rest of the Targaryen dynasty to do it. Tywin saw the gleam in his eyes and quietly acknowledged it with a nod of his own. "Go." He waved a dismissive hand at him and Nymeria, surprising them both. "Rest, if you can. We've a long ride ahead of us. The two of you may do as you wish in the evenings until we reach King's Landing, but be quiet about it." Nymeria needed no further encouragement. The moment he finished, she seized his wrist and all but dragged him out of Tywin's tent towards their own. The hound saw them coming a ways off and pulled the partition aside with a knowing look, sketching a sarcastic bow as he did so. Naruto glowered at him. Not a word. Clegane only chuckled. "Aye. That was a word." Nymeria didn't give him a chance to banter. Her grip bit into his arm as she hauled him inside. The moment they were alone, truly alone, she removed her false face and quickly disrobed, bearing herself to him in all her glory. He had neither the time nor the inclination to ask why she closed the distance between him, threw her arms around him and all but tackled him to the bed. There was a hunger to her kisses he noticed, a desperate air as she fumbled at his clothes. It was unlike her. "Hey," he reached up for her, trying to calm her. "What's wrong?" She unbuttoned his tunic, fingers dancing over the buttons. "Everything's going to change, isn't it? The king's gone missing, the realm is fraying at the seams, soon it will all come undone." He grimaced as she helped him shuck his shirt. "It already has." The moment he was clear of it, she kissed him again, tongue ruthlessly plundering his mouth. He saw stars for a moment and was tempted to give him, but concern won the day. Bereft of his tunic though he was, he still had his trousers, which means she couldn't get what she wanted quite yet. Sitting up, he planted both hands on her hips and drew her back. "What's wrong?" She was silent for a long moment. "I don't want everything to change. I never want to leave this tent." "Oh, Nymeria." She looked up at him, blinking through damp eyes. "Can't we go back?" He pulled her into his arms and kissed her forehead. We both know the answer to that. She latched onto him, trembling. I don't want to lose this moment. Are you? On that, they were in complete agreement. Nor I, you. Promise a woman, promise me you won't die. He winced at the words. You know I can't. She slapped his chest. You must. I can't. Anger blazed in her eyes and he wondered, in that moment, if she might leave. Instead, she seized his trousers with one hand, and reached out to him with the other. Whatever promises you make to the Dragon Queen, whatever oaths you give, promise me this. Promise we'll never part. Still she held out her hand to him and belatedly finally he realized exactly what it was she wanted. His threaded his fingers within hers and held tight. I can promise that much, ya know. Nymeria tore off his trousers and pushed him back down. They didn't get much sleep that night. Pycelle opened the city gates for them. There was a certain irony to be had in that, Naruto supposed. It almost felt like destiny, ya know. They'd ridden hard, and it had taken them ages, weeks, but here at last, they had arrived. The doddering old maester shuffled forward to greet them, feigning weakness and senility as always. Naruto let him exchange perfunctory greetings with the old coot. His gaze was elsewhere, searching, assessing for any sign of danger, weakness, any sign of threat. Instead, he found something else entirely. Or rather, someone. Because there, standing behind Pycelle, guarding the old maester. Was that? It really was. Naruto paused, blinked. Now. It had been a long while, hadn't it? Grinning, he all but threw himself off his horse with a delighted cry and started forward, heedless of Pycelle's protest. Jamie. He almost didn't recognize the man in that armor. He was taller, face leaner, but that confident smirk remained, as did his eyes. He looked tired, his time in the Red Keep had worn him through. But he was still his brother, his big brother, the man he hadn't seen in years. Jamie, for his part, paused as well when he saw him. Blinked now, an almost rueful smile crossing his weary face. Gods, you've gotten tall. Naruto laughed, quietly incredulous. And you look almost exactly the same. He lied. What horrors had this place inflicted upon his poor brother? Laughter was his reward for the lie. Well, we can't all age gracefully, little brother. Naruto lurched forward. Jamie met him halfway, as always. They moved in near unison and collided in a fierce embrace. It felt good, no better than good. He'd taken Jamie for granted until quite suddenly he was gone, and it was wonderful to see him again. He just didn't have the words for that right now. Jamie, however, had a whisper for his ear as he patted his back. She's waiting for you. Naruto gulped. Rayella. Naruto couldn't wait to see Rayella. Unfortunately, he had to delay for several reasons. Royalty, the realm, responsibilities, to name a few of them. He hated it. Part of him wanted nothing more than to say the hells with it and meet her anyway, consequences be damned. But he couldn't. If he went straight to the Queen's chambers after a long journey and was seen, he would be. This was King's Landing in the Red Keep no less. There were eyes everywhere, there'd be questions. Inquiries he was neither prepared to answer nor could for that matter without foolishly implicating himself in his father's conspiracy. So he would wait, for now. Regardless, he resolved to see her by the end of day, come what may. Absence made the heart grow fonder, or so they say, and right now his was feeling fond indeed. Within hours of arriving, Tywin called a gathering of Aerys, small council. Such was his right as hand of the king, none could deny him. No matter how much they wished to, he supposed father could have forced them to meet him in the Tower of the Hand. That he hadn't was a mercy, one he likely wouldn't extend a second time. Naruto initially believed that would be his chance to slip away, a moment to risk a meeting while everyone was distracted with matters of the realm. Wrong on all counts. Much to his annoyance, Tywin declared that both he and Jamie would be present for said meeting. He didn't rightly understand why, but it wasn't an order he could refuse, not without showing his hand. Nor would he for that matter. One did not simply say, no, to Tywin Lannister. When asked, father merely told him to keep his eyes open, and thus it fell to him to make his own conclusions. Still, it was strange that he would have both him and Jamie, still a Kingsguard for now, present at such a pivotal meeting, and so the question persisted, lingering in the back like a wraith in the night. Speaking of sneaky things, Nymeria had slipped away soon after their arrival in Red Keep, donning a new face and leaving without so much as a word. She wasn't exactly gone per se. He could still sense her well enough in the lower levels of the keep, mind you, but her sudden absence after weeks spent together on the road, well. It stung a bit. Following father's orders, no doubt. Or maybe mother had given her another task to attend to. Whatever it was, it wouldn't be a massacre this time, he'd been clear on that. Which brought him full circle to this moment. His thoughts centered themselves as they entered. Father entered first, flanked by Jamie on his left and himself on his right. Another power play, something to show the family united despite the disparity among them. He'd never seen this room before. In truth, it left much to be desired. Tacky was another word for it. Aerys did love his ostentatiously obnoxious displays, and this chamber was no exception. Everywhere he looked he saw black and red, both the banners and colors of House Targaryen, on full display. The braziers burned both bright and hot, lending the room a stifling air. Thankfully they'd left the long table and it many seats be. He didn't much relish the idea of sitting in some red oak chair stuffed with black cushions. Most of the seats were, to his amusement, already occupied by several people. Father had made them wait, a subtle power play on his part. Clever. From the moment Naruto entered the room and saw the state of the king's so-called small council, he began plotting murder. He couldn't help himself. He sensed everyone's ill intent bar two people toward him and responded accordingly. Assess. Observe them. Search for weaknesses. First and foremost he noted the infamously bearded Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Gerald Hightower, known as the White Bull, sitting near the head of the table. The man was strong as an ox and blindly loyal to the Mad King, no matter how cruel and bloodthirsty Aerys was. And there behind him, as though he needed a guard in these troubling times, stood Sir Barristan. Now wasn't this distinguished company? Grand Maester Pycelle was of course present, also one of the first to rise in greeting. And there beside him was Varys himself. He'd not met the Master of Whispers, but to his surprise, the bald man granted him a nod. The others he knew only distantly through name and reputation. This was his first time meeting them. First came the supposed Master of Ships, one Lord Owen Merryweather. A heavily jowled man, clad in the colors of his house, gray of hair with beady eyes and a piggish nose besides. Stout with thick arms and a bulging gut, his riding days long behind him. He was known at court as the Chuckler, given his only apparent skill was laughing at Aerys's pathetic jokes. Not a bad man, but overall an ineffectual sycophant. Next came the Master of Coin, Carlton Chelstead, a craven-looking man, gaunt where Merryweather was fat with a thinning brown beard and dark hazel eyes. Supposedly he too, was a strong supporter of the king over Rhaegar. He was nicknamed the Mason Dagger due to his house's peculiar sigil. Third came the newly minded Master of Laws, Lord John Connington. No fancy clothes for him. He wore a brown tunic with matching trousers and boots. By the smell of him he'd come straight from the practice yard. Both his hair and beard were a fiery red. He was proud, even arrogant person, a faithful friend to Rhaegar, but prickly with others. Too young, too bold and too eager for glory. The rest were sniping and sniveling souls all, with the exception of Varys and Pycelle, who he at least believed were loyal to the Lannisters. Mercifully there was no sign of Wisdom Rossart, the king's pyromancer. Which begged the question of where he was. Nor did Aerys have a master of war, yet. With luck he wouldn't have time to select one. Tywin wasted no time in taking his seat at the head of the table, forcing Naruto and Jamie to follow in his wake. Jamie, at least, was kind enough to let him stand on father's right, while he dutifully claimed the space at his left. He supposed it made for a pretty painting. But they weren't here for that now, were they? Jamie nudged him with an elbow and a rueful look besides. Naruto nudged him back with a smile of his own. Gods and laws be damned, but it was good to have him back. Barristan balked at the exchange. Sir Jamie, you should stand over here. With Hightower and I Kingsguard forever forswear the bonds of family. Naruto clicked his tongue and channeled a bit of Cersei's venom, so rarely seen these days. My brother will stand where he pleases. Barristan bristled in return, momentarily at a loss for words. Naruto felt his opinion of the knight sink lower. The man meant well, really, he was honestly a good soul, noble and true, but that hidebound honor of his was going to be the death of him. Soon, if he wasn't careful. Right now the noble knight looked like he might protest further and make a mountain out of this molehill. Tywin didn't give him the chance. Where is the queen? A ripple of confusion passed through the small council as their concern turned elsewhere. In the end, it was Varys who answered first. She hasn't attended these meetings in quite some time, my lord. She shall. His words were both edict and command all in one. These matters concern her as well. Connington tutted derisively, his youth betraying him. She's a woman, she has no place here. Tywin stared Rhaegar's so-called friend down until he flinched. There are presently only 3 living Targaryens left in the world. Or have you forgotten? Naruto hummed inwardly. 4, counting Nymeria, given she was essentially a bastard, but he was hardly about to reveal her to this lot. Connington averted his gaze. I am aware. Then act like it. Tywin's rebuke cut deeper than any blade. You were chosen for this post because Rhaegar believed you have something to attribute to this council. Planting his hands upon the table, he leaned forward to regard the Master of Laws intently. Was he mistaken? No, my lord. Then refrain from making a fool of yourself again. The tiniest smile touched Varys' face. Pycelle was smirking as well. Naruto noticed. Tywin was in rare form today, he almost pitied these bastards. Almost. At length, Father's gaze roved over the room, noting another absence. And where is the prince? Connington coughed into a fist and tried to rally, recovering from his earlier rebuke. The king. Merryweather coughed wetly into a fist. He is not king so long as his father lives. The prince, Connington amended with a frustrated growl, is presently away dealing with matters of the realm. Tywin pressed the attack. Where? He did not say. Chelsted and Merryweather had nothing to add to that. Varys and Pycelle were likewise silent. Nor did the Kingsguard have anything to add. Tywin gave the lot of them a look that would have frozen Blackwater Bay solid. The realm has known of Aerys' absence for weeks. Collectively, you control more spies and informants than the rest of the world combined. Do you mean to tell me that none of you has any notion of where Rhaegar is? Chelsted grimaced. We are trying to find him, my lord. If looks could kill, he would have been ashes. Try harder. His rebuke given, Father steepled his hands and shook his head, silently despairing of them all. To business, then, he said apropos of nothing. The king has been taken. How did this happen? Several members of the small council squirmed in their seats, none of them wanting to accept blame for this disaster. Varys, however, saw a chance to make himself useful and chimed in quickly. The Darklands of Duskendale are responsible for this, my lord. Tywin's gimlet glare fixed him in place. Explain. Varys did so happily. As I'm sure you know, Lord Dennis Darkland has refused to pay taxes for some time now, demanding a new charter for Duskendale and certain rights for its citizens. Tywin nodded subtly. I am aware. You mean to tell me that is the cause of this insanity? Naruto was also somewhat familiar with the story, having heard it from Tywin himself. Duskendale had once been an important port on Blackwater Bay and a seat of kings, had seen its wealth shrink and trade dwindle due to the growth of nearby King's Landing. Dennis Darkland, as Lord of Duskendale, obviously wished to halt this decline. He probably wanted to win himself a charter for Duskendale, similar as Dorne had received nearly a century before. It was preposterous, of course. Father had firmly rejected the proposal out of hand at the time, seeing neither reason nor right to award so many favors to such a small house. Such a refusing must have infuriated Lord Dennis, naturally. But to kidnap the king from the Red Keep. Something wasn't right. Chelsted reluctantly raised his voice, all but confirming his suspicions. His grace went to Duskendale himself in good faith, with only 2 Kingsguard and a few servants in tow. His retinue was promptly slain, and the king himself taken. Jaime grimaced. Ah, yes, that'd explain it. Naruto thanked his lucky stars that his brother hadn't been part of that entourage. Tywin tutted in agreement, albeit for a different reason. Allowing Aerys to visit Duskendale was insulting as it was stupid. I warned him not to go. Gerald Hightower spoke at the last. He is the king. It is not our place to judge him. Jaime tensed beside him. Naruto sensed a story there. You are correct that it is not your place. Tywin didn't give a chance to ask about it. He turned his wrath upon the Lord Commander. However, he gestured with one hand to the small council, regarding many of them with great scorn. It is our duty to prevent the king from making foolish decisions. This council has failed in that duty. Was he going to dismiss them all and select a new small council? This was a time of crisis. He would be well within his rights as hand of the king. Perhaps the lords of the small council realized it too, because they paled and hurried to offer their opinions on the matter. Varys adopted a faux mournful expression. Indeed we have. Pycelle sputtered to life like the old windbag he was, doubtlessly realizing his position was in peril. No one could have anticipated the king leaving in the dead of night with such a meager guard. No one. Merryweather chimed in. Lord Dennis has refused to give up Aerys. He's threatened to kill the king at the first sign of an assault. Connington slammed a fist against the table. As we cannot attack Duskendale directly, we have no choice but to besiege it. On that, Naruto found himself agreeing with the red-headed knight turned lord. At least then they would see the matter contained, if not necessarily solved. Lord Darkland was probably convinced that it was only a matter of time until Tywin would offer better terms. Foolish of him. Father didn't negotiate with fools, least of all those who kidnapped kings. Perhaps there is another way, Chelsted's reedy voice interjected. Why not simply give Lord Dennis what he wants? It would be the quickest way to ensure the king's release. The small council fell silent. None of them had considered this, clearly. On paper it seemed a soundly simple solution. All eyes turned to Tywin. No, he was swift to rebuff them with a stern word, but deigned to elaborate. We do not negotiate with kidnappers. If we do as Darkland demands, more lords will attempt this tactic. Connington, ever a proponent of Rhaegar, thumped the table. Here. Varys nodded sagely. Indeed, it is you say. Pycelle murmured his assent. Merryweather, meanwhile, wrung his hands. But the king will be freed in the fullness of time. Tywin interjected. Have no doubt of that. Is that why you brought your butcher here? Connington jerked his chin toward Naruto, momentarily surprising him with his forthrightness. Here at last, Tywin paused. I beg your pardon. Varys tittered, doing nothing to hide his amusement. With all due respect, my lord, we know full well how Lord Nathaniel uprooted House Greyjoy and its allies for their ill-fated rebellion in the west. The drowning of the Greyjoys has grown quite popular among the bards these days. Root and stem, I believe the words were. Jaime provided with a bemused smirk. It's quite catchy. More than a few of the lords blanched at the lyrics. Naruto hid a smile behind a hand. From a logical point of view he knew it was only natural for them to be concerned about him, not his closeness with the queen. They weren't aware of that, but rather the way he reacted to uprisings as a whole. Strictly speaking they were above him after all, if only in rank, not strength or skill what truly mattered. As a ninja as Naruto Uzumaki he was certain he could have mopped the floor with them without taking a hit. As Nathaniel Lannister he was slightly less confident in such a perfect performance, but confident nonetheless if it came to a fight. Arthur Dayne isn't here, he noted belatedly. He's probably guarding Rhaegar. Those two were always thick as thieves. As to the Rezer, I can kill everyone in this room if need be, anyone who stands against us. His gaze swifled to the Kingsguard, ignoring Jaime. His brother would ever and always be on his side, but his gaze wasn't quite so kind as he considered Barristan and Hightower. They might give him some trouble if he fought fairly, but he had no intention of meeting either of them in a fair fight to begin with. His daggers were poisoned. It would take but a single cut, and eventually, they would fall. We could have our coup here and now. It was a potent thought. Tempting, too. In one fell swoop, they'd take the city and bar the gates, leaving Rhaegar wherever he was locked out of his own city. Rhaella would support it. She'd probably be delighted. Aerys could die in Duskendale's dungeons for all he cared. Of course, the dissidents in the Red Keep would then need to be purged and their own position fortified before they sent word to Castle Rock. Lyanna and the ladies could then be brought over, and their dragons with them, and those dragons would bring the rest of the world to heel. He could see it now, the Bloody Lion, they would call him. Such an act would make him infamous, worse than Maegor the Cruel. The Lannister name would forever be tainted with treachery for all time. But would that not be worth it, to secure the realm once and for all? To stave off the madness of Aerys and to a lesser extent that pompous fool Rhaegar? It sounded almost too good to be true. Was this father's plan? Was this what he wanted? Naruto's right hand drifted to his hidden dagger. Was it? Tywin noticed his half-lidded gaze and raised his voice. Nathaniel is merely here to learn from my example. Their eyes met for a moment and Naruto heard the implicit warning therein. Not just yet, son. So, not the plan, then. Damn, he hated walking on eggshells. My lords, Barristan offered his own suggestion into the sullen silence that followed. A frontal assault may be out of the question, but a lone man might slip into Duskendale unnoticed. If you manage a distraction, I might be able to effect a rescue. Naruto's brow shot into his hair. Very bad idea. The absolute last thing they wanted was Aerys being rescued immediately. Barristan would never truly know it, but he came within an inch of dying that very moment. You will do no such thing. Tywin thankfully cut the knight's argument out at the legs before he could find another foot to stand on. I forbid you to take any such action until we ascertain the king's condition, I'll not lose another Kingsguard on a fool's farce. Barristan demurred with a frown. As you command. He'd probably obey. The man wasn't the sort to defy authority. Naruto resolved to have him watched regardless. Someday, he might have to kill this noble man. He did not relish the thought. Agreed. Varys tutted, his words for Selmy and Hightower alike. My little birds tell me that 2 of your brothers already lie dead in Duskendale. The Kingsguard's numbers are running remarkably thin these days, aren't they? How many of your order remain now? 4, is it? His round face dimpled in a smile. Or perhaps 3, given Sir Arthur seems to have run off with the prince. We shall replenish those we have lost. The Lord Commander's gaze drifted to Naruto. A sword such as yours would be welcome among our ranks, Lord Nathaniel. Jaime jolted. Tywin twitched. A clever ploy, but ultimately ineffective. Naruto reassured them both with a single scoff. I refuse. Jaime chuckled ruefully. Wise choice. Barristan bristled. Do you mock the White Cloak, Esser? No, Naruto thought inwardly, I mock you and your outdated precepts of honor. We're at war, and you haven't even realized it. Honor won't save you in war. You'll bloody your hands all the same. It's a shame. We could have been such good friends, but you're too caught up in your morals to realize you're serving a monster. Not at all. Outwardly, however, he plastered a winningly limpid smile to his face and put on his best act yet. I simply have greater ambitions than mere knighthood, and a duty to my people. He stepped closer to Jaime in a moment of solidarity, further driving his point home. You'll have to be content with my brother for now. For now, he let the words hang there in silent threat. That quelled the night. Tywin was hand of the king. In Aerys' absence, he spoke with the king's authority. If he so wished it, he could fly in the face of tradition and release Jaime from his vows, reducing the depleted Kingsguard numbers further still. That he hadn't yet done so implied he had a plan in place, perhaps a plan for him, or... Enough. Tywin looked to Varys, distracting him from his thoughts. Can your little birds find their way into Duskendale? The Master of Whispers nodded. They can, my lord. Excellent. Merryweather, be a good man and fetch my quill and paper. From there the meeting dissolved into boring talk of spies and numbers and figures, talk of coin and ships and laws. Naruto listened with one ear, committing the details to memory, yet not particularly caring for them. It soon became abundantly clear that Aerys wouldn't be freed today. Perhaps he never would. Whatever Tywin's plan was, Naruto Nathaniel found he wasn't privy to it. Perhaps that was for the best. Ignorance was bliss and he'd likely learn his place in the grand scheme sooner rather than later. In the end the meeting burned through the better part of the day. The sun hung low in the sky by the time the small council was dismissed for the evening, but not before being informed that the next meeting and every other hence would held be in the Tower of the Hand. There were a few grumbles about that, but Tywin's authority prevailed once more. Surprisingly, he bid Jaime to stay, but let him leave. Naruto found himself glad of it. In truth, his head was already full to bursting with plots and schemes. His family could concoct another one without him. Right now he only wished to see. Might I have a moment of your time, my lord? It was not to be. Now what? His right fist swung out and impacted a nearby wall with an audible crack of sound to leave a visible crater in its wake. Startled servants scurried around him, seeking safety. Naruto ignored them all. Stoically he stood his ground, took a deep breath to center himself, and plastered what he hoped was a believable smile onto his face. He was so close now. Raella's room was just around the corner. And yet. Interruptions. Constant, infuriating, persistent. No more delays after this. I have to see her. I'm losing my patience. He took one last breath to freeze the fire burning in his heart, let it smolder down to cinders. Only then did he dare pivot on his right heel, reluctantly rounding on the speaker in question. Calm, he told himself. Breathe. He did want a word with them, he simply hadn't thought it would be this soon. Let's get this over with. He wasn't surprised to find Varys waiting for him. To his credit, the Master of Whispers didn't smile. He must have known he'd inadvertently irked him just now. My apologies. Hands in his sleeves, he sketched a brief bow. I see I've caught you at a bad time. You must be tired from your journey, perhaps tomorrow. No, Naruto had to force the word through the grit teeth of his false smile. I've been meaning to have a word you. He stalked past the eunuch, fists clenched at his sides. Walk with me. Varys did. Together they adjourned in the spymaster's chamber on the other side of the keep, well away from the queen's chambers. Naruto took stock of it at a glance, noting the bed in the far corner of the wall, well away from the WN dows. More red walls. It wasn't simply the stone of the keep itself. The king apparently enjoyed the color far too much and had his artisans paint over it in places, leaving some rooms like this one a lurid shade of scarlet that hurt his eyes. Colors aside, it was a comfortable space, if a tad smaller than he was accustomed to. He didn't fail to notice a number of crates piled near the southern edge of the room by the man's bed either. Curious. As expected, in the center of the room stood a small wooden table replete with 2 seats and a bottle of wine paired with 2 goblets. Evidently he'd prepared for this meeting some time ago. Varys reached the table first and poured for both of them, perhaps hoping to use the drink to cool his temper. A vintage from the days of the Blackfire rebellions. Do you partake? Naruto noted the words, sat first, and retrieved a goblet, idly meeting his gaze as he swirled the wine within. On occasion. Sweeter than he'd expected, not bad. That said, if Varys he was hoping to poison him, one never knew. In King's Landing he'd be sorely disappointed. He was immune. Varys finally claimed his own seat. You'll be pleased to know our mutual friend is doing quite well these days. Clever. He'd timed his words well, just as he drank, the better to gauge his reaction. Very clever. Well played. You've been at this game longer than me, but I've had a better teacher. He took a deliberately deep drink to mask his smile. Is she now? Quite so, Varys hummed. Cagey as ever. Naruto took another drink. You have my thanks for your support with the small council. Varys chuckled. Nasty business, that. The dragons do seem to have rather poor luck these days, don't they? Naruto didn't rise to the bait. He didn't entirely trust the man, but neither did he actively dislike him, either. He was, by Raella's own accounting in their shared dreams, a friend. Excluding that nasty business with little visories. If it was indeed him. He had no proof, but he suspected. He could have sold her out to Aerys years ago, but instead protected her as best he could and even enabled her to send messages to him before he figured out his dreamwalking jutsu in the first place. Yes, by all accounts, an ally, but he'd been let down by allies before. Back then, I was a fool being led by fools, he muttered under his breath. Varys noticed and mistook his words for something else. You don't trust the small council, then? Not untrue, that. Naruto held out his now empty goblet, silently asking for more as he spoke. They have a reputation for serving their own interests above the realm. I intend to keep their daggers far from my father. Spoken like a loyal son. He frowned. I am. Naturally. What was he up to? If thought to test his loyalty to his family, he'd be in for a surprise. A short, sharp surprise, delivered via dagger. Power is a curious thing, my lord. Varys said suddenly, apropos of nothing. Without warning, he leaned forward with a wry smile. Are you fond of riddles? Naruto wore a grimace as leaned back. Why, am I about to hear one? Evidently so. Varys mirrored the motion and steepled his fingers atop the table. 3 great men sit in a room. A king, a priest, and a rich man. Between them stands a common sellsword. Each great man bids said sellsword kill the other 2. Who lives? Who dies? Tyrion loved riddles. He would have said it depends on the sellsword. After all, most sellswords had neither crown nor gold nor favor with the gods. Yet he had a weapon, while the other 3 did not, which, for that moment, gave him the power of life and death. In the end, he said as much. Varys' smile told him he had answered poorly. But if it's swordsmen who rule, then why do we pretend kinds hold all the power? When Aerys lost his sense and went to Duskendale, who was truly responsible for allowing him to go? The Kingsguard, the prince, or something else? I must confess, I fare rather poorly with riddles. The spymaster chuckled. Yes, your talents tend elsewhere, don't they? The point I make this. Power resides where men believe it resides. It's a trick, a shadow on the wall. He rolled his eyes, perhaps recalling some distant memory only he was privy to. And you cast a very large shadow these days. Do I, now? Naruto scoffed into his wine. I'm not half as smart as Tyrion. Varys blinked, momentarily at a loss for the first time since they'd met. Who, my lord? He granted him a wry grin in a return. My little brother. He would have solved your riddle in a heartbeat. The spymaster seemed a touch intrigued by that. Then I should very much like to meet him someday. In the meantime, I understand you have a habit of collecting rather eccentric pets. Naruto went still. He knew. He didn't know how Varys had found out, only that he did. Deny. Tell him nothing, not a single blood word. I haven't the foggiest idea what you mean. Varys pulled a disappointed face, already seeing through the lie. As that's so, a pity, I had a gift for you. So speaking, he rose, strode over the crate he'd seen before and plucked a nearby iron rod from the floor beside it. Naruto craned his neck and watched, utterly flabbergasted. What was he up to? He didn't wait long for answers. In short order Varys wedged his temporary tool beneath the crate's lid and used it to pry the heavy wooden box open with a series of quick, practiced motions. Its lid parted with nary a noise, allowing the eunuch to lift the wooden frame and peer inside, but warily, as if he half expected the contents within to rear up and bite him. Good. When it did not, he tutted to himself at length, nodding once in apparent satisfaction. Just as it was, at length, he glanced back at him. Won't you have a look, Lord Nathaniel? Naruto remained where he was. I don't think that's a good idea. It's hardly going to bite you. Ain't the bitten I'm worried about. He slipped back into his old manner of speech for a moment. Varys stared at him expectantly. With an exasperated sigh, the whiskered warrior righted himself, rose from his chair and crept over warily, to inspect the eunuch's prize. He couldn't see it, not at first, but as he edged closer, his faith was rewarded. Sure enough, there, nestled neatly amidst a pile of warm hay, it lay. Warm as a summer's day. A dragon egg. It was a large thing, mottled blue-gray mixed with a color caught somewhere between gold on green. It wasn't fake. Truth be told, he'd suspected it would be some at that, flagrant forgery meant to win him over. Now he inhaled reflexively once he realized it wasn't. No, he could sense life stirring within its sturdy confines, a large soul housed in a tiny body, ready to burst into life at the slightest provocation. One of the 9 was undoubtedly trapped within that egg, and by its coloration, he had an inkling as to whom. He glared at Varys. Where did you get this? Many things fall into my web these days, my lord. The spider planted both hands in his sleeves once more as though afraid to touch the egg himself and granted him a gracious brow. This one cost a rather hefty sum to extricate. The queen is also rather well known for collecting curiosities of late as well. One could say I procured to this at her request. He hadn't, of course, but it was still a useful excuse should it ever be found in his possession. Such an excuse might well save his life. Would you like to hold it? Bad idea, very bad idea, all the very bad ideas. If that little bastard hatched here and now, he'd have some explaining to do. Moreover, a chirpy baby dragon would be hell's to hide. And yet, he gripped his right wrist with his left hand, lest it betray him. A disbelieving laugh leapt from his lips. Does Rhaegar know about this? No. Varys was sober, succinct, and moreover, not one for small talk at the moment. As his current egg has yet to hatch, I saw little point in informing him. Naruto felt a fiery flash of triumph at that. He was particularly proud of that ruse. Son Goku remained safe with Lyanna, far from King's Landing. With this little one under his watchful eye, that left only 3-tailed beasts or dragons now, he supposed yet unaccounted for. Supposedly Euron knew of at least one, a secret the wily Greyjoy had clung tight to since their alliance first sprung up 2 years ago. Now that madman had gone rooting about in the ruins of Old Valyria at his behest, and there was no telling when he'd return. Still, to find another egg here, of all places. What were the chances? Slim to none, that's what. He didn't know whether the gods of this world hated him, loved him, or simply enjoyed making mischief for him. Varys coughed pointedly behind him, breaking the spell. I believe we can dispense with the secrets now, yes. Naruto laid a hand on the egg, ready to slam the crate's lid shut at the slightest sign of movement. Warm, but inert, the tailed beast within stirred, but sleepily, lost in its dream. It wouldn't wake for him unless he forced it to, and he had no intention of doing so. Thank the sage for small mercies. But to have the egg in King's Landing at all was a terrible risk, akin to a primed explosive tag, just waiting to detonate. A grimace tugged at the corner of his mouth. I suppose you want to sell it to me. Varys scoffed. Perish the thought. Consider it my gift to you. Naruto granted him an incredulous look. Why, what do you gain from this? Trust, I would hope. The man inclined his head, jowled face unusually stern for once. I know you do not truly think of me as a friend, indeed you would be a fool to do so early in the game. But be assured, my lord, I am an ally to your cause, through and through. He gestured to the egg. I can think of no better way to win your goodwill. I despise magic, and all those who practice it, but even I cannot deny that a growing dragon will be useful in ridding the realm of Aerys and his ilk. Pleasing words, but he had yet to truly sound out his loyalties, even if he hadn't sensed a lie yet. And what of Rhaegar? Here at last, a rare look of scorn crossed the visage of Varys. A fanciful fool in prince's clothing. A well-meaning fool perhaps, but a fool nonetheless. He may be loved by the small folk at the moment, but he would upend the realm in an instant in pursuit of prophecy. No, he cannot be allowed to rule, any more than his father. That burden must fall to another. One who has proven herself sound of mind and heart, despite the woe her family continually inflicts upon her. With a capable husband by her side, such a ruler would make for a magnificent monarch. Rhaella. He was talking about Rhaella. Their eyes met and a knot came uncoiled in Naruto's chest. Varys was telling the truth, he genuinely believed those words. There was only one more question he need ask. Trust aside, what's your goal here? A bold question. Suffice to say I seek only the safety and stability of the realm, be it under the lion or the dragon. Another truth, and by far the most important one yet. That was all he needed to know. Even then, it took a serious effort on his part to release the egg. Varys noted his restraint with some approval. Your wisdom does you credit. Perhaps someday, when our friendship is older, I shall tell you the story of how I was cut. But for now, I will say this. Influence grows like a weed. I tended mine patiently until its tendrils wrapped around all of King's Landing and much of Westeros besides. You have tended yours as well, in your own way. He granted the last part to him with a nod, and now the realm knows of your exploits. As such, I have no doubt what you want will be yours in time, provided you have the stomach for it. Naruto considered those words, ominous though they were. He looked back to the egg. An idea dawned. Tilda. The hour was late, most late indeed. So too, was Nathaniel Lannister. Terribly, horribly, late. Rhaella had waited patiently for her beloved, oh so patiently, but now that patience was nearing its end. She had watched from her window as the column of Lannister banners arrived at the gates and were welcomed into the Red Keep. She'd seen two figures standing at the head of that column and she just knew that he had come for her. Oh, how her heart had fluttered then. Yet as the hours dragged by, her long-lost love failed to make an appearance. She sent servants to subtly inquire as to the status of the keep's guests, only to be informed that there was a meeting of the small council in progress. Even after said meeting ended, Nathaniel was nowhere to be found. One of them informed her that he had been seen walking with Lord Varys. He was here, yet he hadn't come to her. Why? Anxiety gnawed at her heart like an apple's worm. Most of the day passed and still, nothing. When the sun set, so too did her hopes, and with the waning light, her spirit sank into darkness. Questions began to abound in her mind one after another, each more painful than the last. Why had he not come to her? Why hadn't she seen him in her dreams for the last year? Had he not received her missive? Had he given up on her? Forsaken her? Soon her mood soured and she sent her handmaidens away for the evening, wishing to be alone. She began nursing a bottle of wine without the goblets. She had no need for decorum in her own private chambers, but that only made her melancholy and the bitter taste upset her stomach. Late. Where had he gone this time? Where was her lion? Sullenly, she kicked at her bed and buried her face in her pillows to no avail. No one heard her, no one came. She was alone with naught but her own thoughts for company. Her eyes began to sting, threatening angry tears, but she knew if she started crying, she would never stop. In the end she changed into her pale nightgown and resigned herself to another sleepless night, alone with naught but her fingers to slake her desire. Come the dawn, she would track that lazy Lannister down and have words. Tap tap tap. Someone knocked on her door, dispelling her dark thoughts like so much morning mist before a warm breeze. Rhaella jolted upright from where she lounged in her bed, hurriedly checked her reflection in the mirror, hoped against hope, and tried not to panic. Who goes there? Sir Jaime, having the night watch, answered readily enough. Nathaniel Lannister, your grace. Her heart leapt into her throat, performed a cartwheel there, and stuck the landing. Naruto, so late, be still my heart. Rhaella forced herself to face her fears with a stiff upper lip. Enter. Credit where it was due, Jaime obeyed her command without question and did just that. The door eased open. Wait, why was she the one blushing? There he was. Gods, but he'd grown even more handsome since she'd seen him last. He was truly a young man now. His eyes widened ever so slightly at the sight of her, while hers raked over every inch of him like the fine feast he was. As ever, He wore the traditional colors of his house, but for some reason he held an odd satchel of sorts slung over his shoulder, the strap of which he held tight in his right hand. It marred what would have otherwise been an impeccable look. Whatever was he up to now? No, never mind that. Future husband, mine. She glanced at Jamie and mustered her best queenly mien. You did well to see him in, Sir Jamie, we have matters of great import to discuss. No one is to disturb us upon penalty of death. Your queen commands it. Jamie looked between the two of them and nodded, a knowing gleam in his eye, the smallest of smiles tugging at his lips. As you say, your grace. Then he winked Nathaniel's way. Good luck, little brother. Jamie. With but a chuckle, he closed the door behind him and stood guard. He, at least, could be trusted to hold his tongue, unlike everyone else. Oh gods, they might have mere moments at best. Rayella took a breath and inched forward. My love, is that really you? Naruto held up a hand to forestall her approach, placing a finger over his lips for silence. Then he pulled something out of his satchel. Rayella frowned, watching him turn and apply something to the wall near the door. Several somethings, actually. What are you doing? Silencing seals. Her frown deepened, momentarily put out by his lack of explanation. I do not understand. He winked at her as he finished applying them. They muffle noise. Heat rose in her cheeks. Well, then. Whatever they were, they faded into obscurity the moment his hand left them alone, as though they'd never existed at all. If she hadn't been looking straight at the ancient script as it vanished, she wouldn't have known it was there in the first place. In the end took him the better part of a minute and agonizing 60 seconds to fully apply them all. She even watched him walk his way up the ceiling and walls to make wholly certain the room was covered from all angles. At length he finished, dusted himself down, and dropped back to the floor. There, he turned a wry smile on her. We should be. Rayella launched herself at him. Credit where it was due, Nathaniel Naruto met her halfway with a startled laugh. Several things happened at once. First he caught her by the hips, spun her around to bleed off momentum, took her into his arms, then pulled her close until their foreheads collided. Gently, thankfully. The moment he touched her, she snuggled closer, eager to get at him, to have him in her arms and hold him tight. This close she caught his scent and it was just as she remembered in her dreams, he smelled faintly of fire and sunlight. Maybe it had something to do with him rejuvenating her, but she couldn't get enough of it, nor him. She touched his face with both hands, fingers trailing over his visage, marveling at him, at the tactile sensation of him beneath her hands. You're real, aren't you? Words babbled out of her, one after the other. Tell me I'm not still dreaming. He took her fingers in hand and kissed the back of her knuckles. Does that answer your question? She felt that. A tremulous smile broke out across her face, with it the tears finally broke free from her eyes tumbled down her cheeks. My lion, you're late, so very late. He winked her way and dared a dashing smile, the absolute rapscallion. Better late than never. Rayella pouted and thumped his chest. No, better early than not at all. You kept me waiting. He laughed at that, and belatedly, Rayella realized she was as well. Her eyes flicked up to his, then lower to his lips. His hands fell back to her hips and intensified their grip there ever so slightly. He pulled her closer and almost unconsciously she found herself looping both arms behind his neck, the better to draw him in against her and press her full bosom against his chest, subtly grinding her hips against his. Someone moved first. Rayella didn't care who, only that somebody did. Her mouth met his and that was that. She stopped caring about anything beyond mutual pleasure and getting him to her bed. Once there she pushed him down onto the featherbed with a possessive snarl she dove down and kissed him again, let him wrap an arm around her waist, but moved his free hand to her rightmost breast, urging him to caress her through the thin fabric of her nightgown, because she wanted to be touched and she needed this. It had been so long since she'd willingly kissed a man, let alone allowed herself to be held by one since she had her youth returned to her. It was everything she wanted and more. But not enough. Clothes. Too many clothes. She wanted to be atop him. Not just like this with the two of them fumbling at one another, but skin to skin as she rode him into oblivion and beyond. Any daughter or son she had would be of him and no other. She craved that, the certainty of sex, the warm pleasure of falling asleep in her beloved's arms. Her hands found the buttons of his tunic and tugged them apart, then made to remove the satchel still draped about his shoulder. Wait, Naruto broke their kiss and held up a hand before she could remove it. Not yet. But why? She hated how needy she sounded in that moment, how desperate she must seem for him. Haven't we waited long enough? It's not that. His smile was nervous. I have a gift for you, and I know I'll be too tired to remember it later. Desire warred with curiosity. A gift for her name day. He knew what was approaching. What is it? She asked. Taking one hand from hers, he reached back into his satchel. Power. Rael appeared at him as he did so. More silencing seals, but though he already, oh. Oh my goodness. Her brain briefly blanked and hands flew to her face as her long-lost love withdrew the item in question, then presented it to her. A large dragon egg of mottled bluish-gray mixed with a golden green. She had no doubt at all that it was for her, just as she had a foreboding feeling as to what would happen when she touched it. She shouldn't. This wouldn't simply destabilize Ares' rotten reign already on its last leg, this would ruin Rhaegar. It would be a true betrayal of her family in its fiercest form. A lifetime ago, she would have hesitated. Now. Raela reached out like an eager girl, cupping her newfound prize in her palms. She felt the heartbeat within and was humbled by it, the enormity of the gift that was being given to her. She didn't dare move as Naruto laid his hands over hers, closed his eyes and mumbled something under his breath. Whatever it was, it worked. She felt a pulse of energy pass through their intertwined fingers and into the egg's shell. The entire thing trembled in her grasp. It was her only warning. And then. It hatched in her hands. A gorgeous dragon hatchling burst from the egg, bearing gray-blue scales blending into golden amber and with 6 wings, 3 to each side alongside a single tail. It reeled for a moment to shake itself free of the egg's ichor, blinked its golden-green eyes, then arched its little neck back and hollered up at the ceiling. Miraculously, her mind instantly intuited a single word behind that thin, reedy cry. Freedom. Raela laughed incredulously. Hello, little one. She didn't miss Naruto's hum of triumph as his arm encircled her shoulders. Long time no see, Chome. Tap tap tap. A knock came at Tywin's door. Just as he had expected. In truth, he'd been awaiting their arrival for quite some time now. She was late. As was the hour, for that matter. Setting aside his ink and quill, Tywin paused to proofread his latest letter, nodded once when he found it satisfactory, then sealed with red ink and stamped his sigil into it before passing the missive off to Grand Maester Pycelle. The man would see it sent by morning, then dismissed said maester for the evening. The doddering old fool left with nary a protest, still feigning that ever-present shuffle in his step as he made for the exit. Ever pretending to be less than he was, that one. Tywin despised such a practice in principle, even as he understood the need for it. With mad dragons about and a rogue prince on the loose, one could never be too careful. That said, he waited until he was certain Pycelle had departed before he addressed the new arrival at the main entrance to his chambers. Enter. Clegane opened the door. Nymeria stalked inside, paused a stone's throw before his desk, and knelt before him, pressing one fist into the floor. She did not bow her head, nor did he expect her to. She simply stared. She'd donned a different face again, he'd noted. This one was a redhead with green eyes. Eerie business, that. According to Nathaniel, she'd recently gained the ability to impersonate someone without removing their face at all. But a sword was still a sword, and hers was sharp, matter how eerie that edge might seem. Moreover, he knew she was loyal to his son beyond a shadow of a doubt, and thus, loyal to him. Thus she could be entrusted with certain tasks that neither he nor Nathaniel could be seen doing. Such as tonight's dark deed. Is it done? Yes. Her head bobbed in a nod. He received the gift. Good. He nodded once, pleased by her discretion. There wasn't so much as a drop of blood on her. I trust he sleeps well, then. Another nod. Indeed. With the fishes, it went without saying. John Connington was more than a mere fool, he was a rash fool with ideas, and that made him dangerous. Tywin had no patience for his kind, certainly not the sort that would see Rhaegar ascend the throne. He had already proven himself reckless during today's meeting of the small council, and that alone was enough to see him sanctioned, but his casual disparagement of Nathaniel was a step too far. Any one of those things alone, Tywin could have tolerated. But all three. Rhaegar already had a woefully small power base amongst the nobles here in King's Landing, and this would erode it yet further. The people might favor him, another matter to address, but even their favor meant nothing without the support of the great houses. There would be suspicion when he returned, of course. The loss of a friend would unsettle the prince. Anger him, obviously. Nothing could be proven, naturally. After all, Flea Bottom was dangerous at night, was it not? Who could say what might transpire there? Connington had taken a long walk off a short pier, one with great weights tied to his legs. His body wouldn't be found for quite some time. Tywin looked back to Nymeria. And what of your other endeavors? Her unblinking eyes met his. I saw the spider speaking with Magister Illyrio Mopatis in the Street of Silk. Tywin knew that name, a wealthy and admittedly powerful merchant prince from Pentos. The man dealt in all sorts of things. Curious, why was he here in King's Landing? What business did Varys have with him? Matters to be considered later, he supposed. And the others? Merryweather and Chelstead have their own vices. Wine, women, other things. I took note of them. Judging by her distasteful grimace, she'd gotten rather close while doing so. There was nothing she wouldn't do for the sake of the Lannisters. My lord, when the time comes, may I? Tywin scoffed, because he knew full well what she was asking, even if she daren't speak the words aloud. You may deal with them directly in the future, if that is your wish. A look of feral glee crossed her visage before it was quickly suppressed. She paused, tongue working in her mouth before she found the words. Where is my lord? Ah, no doubt she was looking for comfort after her dark deeds. Tywin tutted, he is occupied. The girl's brow furrowed in annoyance. With her. She knew he'd gone to see Rhaella, then. He didn't like the look in her eye. Best nip that problem in the bud while he could. You could never hope to have him to yourself, not truly. You know this. His purpose is far too important. She bristled, stung by the remark. He loves me. He certainly does. Tywin surprised her with another nod. Nate often raved about her, and these last few weeks on the road to King's Landing had seen the two of them thick as thieves. See to it that you don't get him killed. Nymeria's head snapped down as she bowed. Neither dagger nor arrow shall harm him. You have my word. Tywin stared her down. I'll hold you to that. He didn't doubt she would stay true. It was all coming together. Nathaniel had already ensured the loyalty of Winterfell and Dorne, while crushing the Greyjoys for their foolish rebellion. Soon he would seize the crown. Cersei would secure the Stormlands through Robert Baratheon, whether she wanted to or not. He had plans for Tyrion and Jaime as well. Once this nasty business with the Targaryens ended and the Lannister legacy was secure, he would see Jaime released from his Kingsguard vows and dangle him before the lords and ladies of Westeros in search of a suitable match. Likewise, Tyrion would have his own part to play in the years to come, though he had yet to decide what that part would be. Didn't Mace Tyrell have a newly born daughter? Granted she was but a babe for now, having only just seen her first name day, yet still, 9 years wasn't such a difference. Tyrion had proven himself capable and clever even as a third son, and Tywin was prepared to reward such due diligence. If the boy was still fond of Clegane's little sister by the time he came of age, he could always take her on as a mistress. Thoughts for later, he supposed. Nymeria rose with a huff, no doubt divining his distraction. May I depart? Tywin nodded one last time. You may, but leave my son be for now. The two of you cannot be seen together in this place. A flash of hurt danced through her gaze and she inhaled audibly, nearly hissing like a cat. The faceless woman spun on her heel, intent to storm out. Gods, but she reminded him so much of Cersei sometimes. He couldn't let her leave like that, if only because he knew she'd get up to something foolish. Blast, but Nathaniel was making him soft. Nymeria. The faceless woman paused just shy of the threshold, but kept her back to him, the greatest sign of defiance he'd seen in her yet. Still, she didn't depart, so Tywin took the opportunity to reel her back in. Rising from his desk, he circled around it, strode to her side, and laid a hand on her shoulder. He'd never been one to mince words before and he certainly wasn't about to now. You are a credit to this family. I consider you a daughter in all but blood. He did, insomuch as he would one who didn't have Lannister blood running through her veins. Continue as you have, and I shall see you rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. Likewise, the stain will be removed from your name. Her shoulders shivered. She knew what he was offering her. With but a word and the sweep of a quill, she wouldn't be a bastard anymore, not the spawn of an ill-fated knight of passion, but would be a true Targaryen that would make her all but royalty in the era to come. I know these last 2 years have been difficult for you. But hold fast. He squeezed her shoulder in what he hoped was a reassuring manner. It's nearly over. Nymeria shivered again. He knew she craved praise and acceptance, the latter she possessed aplenty, yet the former had been in short supply as of late. Hers had been a thankless task indeed. She was their dagger in the dark, fending off any and all threats that came for the family in the shadows. And there had been many. So many. In a sense, the defiance of Duskendale was almost a relief, if only because it meant those meddling fools had ceased for the moment. Nymeria reached up and clasped his hand. I despise King's Landing. How much longer will we be in this place? Assuming things went according to plan and they pulled off a bloodless coup. Not long at all. Left unsaid was what might transpire if things became complicated. At length, she looked his way. Swear to me that I'll have a place by your son's side once this is done. Such a precocious girl. Tywin barked a rare laugh. Truly she and Cersei were two peas in a pod. Small wonder she'd taken to training her. The difference being, of course, that he didn't mind Nymeria being near Nathaniel. She was good for him, a way of keeping his son sharp when he might have otherwise grown soft with sentiment. Cersei on the other hand. No, best not think about that at the moment. You have my word, he said at last, knowing what she wanted to hear. A Lannister pays his debts, as you well know. Something softened in her gaze, and she almost seemed to sag in his grasp. I'm tired, my lord. May I be excused? Tywin released her shoulder. You may. Nymeria Scarpard fled more like all but hastening out the room. Clegane watched her go with a rueful look, his healed face betraying none of the concern he felt. She'll remember that, MLORD. Tywin watched her go with a sigh. Good, see to it that she doesn't do anything foolish. He hoped that girl wouldn't become a problem. Tilda. What should we do with him? What indeed? Having a baby dragon was a problem, Naruto agreed wholeheartedly. That was the proverbial question, wasn't it? What should one do with a sleepy baby Biju dragon? It was easy to say, let him rest, and he had after being fed and given a chance to rest, but keeping him hidden here in Raella's room was very much a stopgap measure that wouldn't last come morning. Someone would see Chome, then all hells would break loose. Truth be told, Naruto didn't have an answer for said question or dragon, just yet, but he was working on it as best he could. Really? That was a thing. He was definitely doing it. In all fairness, there was a perfectly good reason he hadn't come up with anything. Because you see, Queen Rhaella Targaryen was being terribly distracting at the moment in more ways than one. She'd all but pinned him to the bed with her hips, locked her legs against his and sat firmly atop a sensitive place. Coupled with the fact that she was wearing naught but a thin nightgown of diaphanous silk and the fact that he could both see and feel every inch of her pressing against him. Suffice to say he couldn't think straight at the moment. If Rhaella had her way, she probably would have latched onto his wrists with both hands, torn off all his clothes and ravaged him until dawn. Make no mistake, she would have too. Alas, she couldn't, given her arms were currently cradling a sleeping baby dragon against her bosom. Lucky little bastard. He grit his teeth, brow furrowed at the sight. We'll deal with him in the morning. Rhaella caught him staring and her pale visage lit up in a smile, violet eyes sparkling with manifold mirth. Jealous, are we? Of him, he scoffed at the lazy lizard presently snoring away. Hardly. Is that so? She granted him a sensual smile and began to move her hips against his in a long undulating movement, the friction of which threatened to drive him mad. Blast, but his trousers and her gown were in the way. Worse for him she knew that and kept grinding herself against him anyway, tormenting him with her touch. He bit back a groan. You're good at that. The queen tossed her head with a pleased hum, idly tucking a stray strand of pale hair behind her right ear with one hand. When I was but a girl, my mother paid for the finest women in Lee to teach me the way of the seven sighs. Her eyes met his, half-lidded, all but preening as continued to gently rock her body against his. You won't find me some blushing virgin. Right, he may have restored her youth and more, but she was older than him, wasn't she? Experienced, too. Inevitably his gaze drifted down to her toned stomach beneath her gown, followed by her thighs. Two could play that game. Propping himself up on his elbows, he laid one hand upon her left leg, pushed her gown back, and began running his fingers across her pale skin. From there, he continued, lazily tracing a slow circle against her inner thigh, gradually moving deeper as he went, thoroughly massaging her with his fingers until he reached. Oh! Rhaella gasped in surprise at first, both at his boldness and the sudden sensation, but only for a moment. Her surprised cry soon faded in a sultry hum once she realized what he intended. She didn't stop moving her hips against him, on the contrary, she leaned into his hand all the more. Biting her lips she gazed down at him, eyes glazed, breaths coming in short gasps as he deftly administered to her every need. It wasn't long before she was all but writhing against him, begging for more. When she finally spoke, it was all she could do to get the words out. Where did you learn this? You won't find me lacking, either. He replied, continuing his torment of her. You'd be amazed what a Dornish princess can teach you. She tutted, clearly undone by him. I don't want to talk about other women right now. In this moment, you're. Without warning, her voice peaked and her body betrayed her, bucking against his unwanted need. Victory. Naruto leaned back with a smug smirk, darkly triumphant. You were saying. Rayella glared at him, panting, struggling to recover. That was unfair. His grin grew. Point for him. Her eyes blazed with lust, and too late, he realized he might have made a mistake. Rayella didn't give him time to regret his decision. Deftly shifting Chome to rest against her left arm, she thereby freed her right hand to reach out, seize him by the chin and drag his face up to hers. Her lips met his fiercely, burning with repressed passion unleashed in all its fiery glory, driving him down to the bed with a swarm of hungry kisses. He couldn't help but return them in kind, laughing a little now as the queen used her bare feet to help him kick out his boots. Alas, his trousers remained where they were, much to her annoyance. Beloved, she lowered her voice and laid a hand upon his cheek, caressing his face. If you don't remove your pants and start fucking me properly, I am going to be very cross with you. He laughed outright. I could say the same of your gown, but one of your arms seemed to be preoccupied at the moment. In truth, he didn't think she'd rise to the challenge. She'd been far too preoccupied with holding Chome, much like a mother would her child. It had become blindingly apparent that Rayella adored the baby Biju dragon as though it were own, and in a sense he supposed it was. Someday she'd ride her dragon into battle, but for now she seemed obsessed with holding him. Imagine his surprise then, when she plucked one of the pillows from the bed, gently set Chome atop at the foot of said bed, then turned to face him in her entirety. Oh, dear. The moment both her arms were free, Rayella reached down, grabbed her nightgown and tore it clean off. He heard the fabric rip in her haste to remove it. She cast it over her shoulder, where it landed atop the sleeping Chome's many wings, provided the slumbering dragon with an impromptu blanket of sorts as the queen shed her only article clothing. She wasn't wearing anything beneath. He'd already known that, mind you, glimpsed it, felt it, but seeing was as they say believing. Rayella bared herself to him without hesitation, yet the moment their eyes met it was she who faltered, she who crossed both arms over her full bosom, she who averted her gaze. Almost as though she were ashamed. Oddly enough, the thought made him angry. She had nothing to be ashamed about. He'd more than restored her youth, he'd brought her back to her prime, filling her with vim and vigor. Yes, that had caused some small suspicion in the court, but he considered it a worthy sacrifice to see her happy. Let the realm run rife in rampant rumors. Here and now they had each other. Kurama would have called that corny. For him, it was simply the truth. They'd formed a powerful bond over these years, and here now, with them finally face to face, not in dreams, but flesh, he couldn't help himself. Without a second thought, he reached up and laid a hand on her cheek, steering her face back to his. He wasn't surprised to find tears in her eyes, not when her hands sought his face, nor her lips his. She latched onto him and kissed him fiercely, as though she were afraid he might evaporate in her arms. All her joy was wrapped in a fine film of fear, poisoning her every thought, tainting her happiness. That wouldn't do. Frowning, he pulled her close, allowing her to lay atop him. What's wrong? I find myself overcome, she confessed on a thread of breath, words little more than a whisper as she pressed her face into his chest. I keep expecting something to go wrong. The bells will start ringing, Eris will return somehow, or Rhaegar will do something inordinately stupid and... Alright, cutting that off at the pass. Naruto coughed pointedly into a fist before her concerns could consume her. I have something else for you. Delving a hand into the pocket of his trousers, he withdrew a small velvet box, no larger than his thumb. Rayella lifted her head, quietly confused by the sight, but he didn't give her a chance to inquire. Opening it, he held it out to her, or rather, the contents within. Her violet eyes swept toward it and her gaze narrowed, first in confusion, then. She jolted upright with a start, sitting atop his lap. Is that a... Looking back, Naruto knew he would forever savor this scene, this moment, the sound she made. It was a noise caught somewhere between a sob and a sigh and a shout. Her gaze snapped toward him, back to the box, then to him again. Judging by the sheer gibberish that followed, she appeared to have momentarily lost the ability to speak. It took a monumental effort on his part to hold his own tongue and not laugh at how cute she was being right now, if only because he knew she'd absolutely stab him if he mocked her. And so he simply continued holding the small box out to her, inviting her to take its contents. Two paired rings awaited her within, their purpose clear. Rayella gazed upon them and laughed helplessly. He sympathized with her. He'd once offered her a ring in a dream long ago, The object in question hadn't been real, didn't exist in the physical world, but that was then, this was now. Now she trembled, if only because she was one of the few, the only, who knew of the marriage customs of his old world. Even then, he wondered if he might have broken her, because she'd since ceased making any noise altogether and gone incredibly still. He winked her way. Now we just have to find ourselves a priest. I suppose your term would be a septon, wouldn't it? A wry laugh escaped him. Sorry, I still get the two confused. Rather than speak, her gaze flitted down to the first ruby-red ring within, encased in a fine band of gold bearing the likeness of a lion, and then to its pair, a silver ring etched with a peerless sapphire, the gem caught within the maw of some great dragon. There was no trace of negativity within her now, only a radiant joy that eclipsed everything else. As he looked on, she trembled atop him. Tears welled up in her eyes, rolled down her cheeks, tumbled down to fall upon her bare breasts as she sobbed softly in quiet disbelief. You planned this, didn't you? Ah, good, she had her voice back. He'd been worried there for a moment. I did promise you a proper ring when we met, he granted her a wry smile. A Lannister pays his debts, you know. With one hand, he took the red ring and slid it onto her finger, then allowed her to do the same for the silver when she finally found the strength to move. It fit his finger perfectly, of course it did. He'd been careful with his own measurements and Mother had happily supplied Raella's for him once he revealed his intentions. A perfect fit. Taking the Targaryen queen's hand in his, he looked up at her, and never letting his eyes leave hers, laid a gentle kiss upon her knuckles. Then, for her benefit, he said the words he knew she'd been longing to hear from the moment they reunited. Hello, wife, I've missed you. They were the straw that broke the dragon's back. The fateful poke that sent her over the edge. She tackled him. There was no transition between one moment and the next. The instant he said those words, Raella slammed into him. Breath burst from his lungs as she barreled him back into the bed and pushed him into the pillows. It didn't so much sting as startle him. Her eyes met his, blazing with desire, nothing left to shackle, no restraint, nor the tattered threads of her own patience. Oh, dear, perhaps he'd pushed her a tad too far. She looked like she wanted to devour him. Husband. Raella all but hummed the word as she loomed over him. First you present me yourself, then a dragon, now a ring. Are you trying to drive me mad with desire? Chome snorted in his sleep, blissfully unaware of what was about to happen. Treacherous little bastard was lucky. He, on the other hand, was about to experience a very different kind of luck. Gonna be so sore tomorrow. One last valiant attempt was made on his part to save himself from what was to come. Would you believe me if I said I just wanted to see you smile? Her eyes watered anew. Husband. What? It was true. After everything she'd been through, she deserved all the happiness this warped, wicked world had to offer. And he would give it to her, come hell or high water. Still, she'd inadvertently put him on the spot here. To declare his affections aloud to a woman who was older than him despite her rather recent rejuvenation left him feeling flustered for the first time in forever. I mean, I'd say I love you, but you know that already, don'tcha? He slipped back into his old manner of speech without thinking. I adore you, I treasure you, I want to build a life with you. Husband. He barreled on, fearing he might have upset her. And I know you might not be ready for that after all the shit you've grown through. He was babbling now, yet he couldn't help himself. But I swear I won't let Aerys or Rhaegar touch you, and if they do, I'll chop off there. Raella pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. Husband. But she enjoyed using that word, didn't she? I understand. Now shush. Naruto shushed up. Raella took full advantage of his silence and leaned in, pinning him completely, and he was content to let her. I am yours. She whispered the words, lips moving over his, mouth brushing his in a feather-light kiss while she spoke. As you and your brides to be are mine. For all time. Her eyes strayed lower to his pants. And speaking of mine. Uh-oh. She didn't give him time for a clever quip. She latched onto his trousers and ripped them clean off him, breeches and all. Fortunately for him he'd packed a spare in his satchel and. Raella pinched his cheek, not harshly as a certain Pinkett once did long ago, but fondly, gently, tugging him back to reality. Do pay attention, husband. Laughter bubbled up in him as she nuzzled her nose against his. You're going to use that word at every opportunity, aren't you? Of course I am. Her pale face dimpled in a haughty smirk. You are the husband I chose. Just as my mother chose hers. Really now? His curiosity piqued, briefly winning out over his base desires. Really? You never told me about. Rayella kissed him and bit his lip with an aggravated growl. Sex. Now, before little Chome wakes up. Such a demanding queen I have. She quirked an arched brow, channeling every bit of her ancient ancestors and every Targaryen yet to be born. Would you have me any other way, Esser? Such a silly question, one he already knew the answer to. He gave her nose a quick peck. Never. Rayella kissed him anew in return, took a hold of him with both hands, settled herself firmly in his lap, planted her palms on his chest and began to move. His hands settled on her hips in return, holding fast, spurring her on as she arched her back. Gods, but she was good at that. Too good. It was enough to drive a man mad. Unwilling to simply be a passive party in their lovemaking as she ground herself against him, he soon sat up and pulled her in against him completely, to which his lady love laughed, linked both arms around his neck, and held on for dear life, pushing her hips into his with increasing speed. Her mouth sought his in a hungry kiss, one he was all too happy to reciprocate as her bountiful bosom pressed against his chest. Laughing anew, she pressed into him, riding him with a delighted noise. In the delicious friction that followed, all thoughts of history and dragons fell away, they had only one another. To call what followed gentle or tame would have been a jest. It was not. Indeed, this was anything but. They ravaged each other. Her fingernails bit into his back, drawing deep scratches, pleasure mingling with pain as her legs locked around his hips, preventing him from pulling away. Not that he would have. He whirled and pressed her against the headboard, and soon enough she was gasping out his name, urging him on, harder, better, faster, stronger. Finding release wasn't merely a matter of if, but when, and once they had it wasn't enough for either of them, not nearly. How could it be, when they'd spent so long apart talking only in letters and dreams and only just now come face to face with one another? He wasn't satisfied, and neither was she. The moment Rayella caught her breath, she pounced. He was happy to let her. From there, they went at it again and again and again, every position they could think of exploring one another's bodies to the fullest of delights. All the while Rayella insisted on looking him in the eye, indeed, she seemed determined not to take her gaze from his. Nor would he, hers. He wasn't sure how much time passed after their second time, nor their third, or fourth, or even the fifth. Seconds. No. Minutes. Maybe. Hours. Definitely. Thank the sage for those silencing seals. They would have woken half the castle with the ruckus they made. He pitied poor Jaime standing guard. Eventually, however, even their enhanced stamina gave out, leaving them spent, slick and sated, sprawled out on a very much broken bed amidst the wreckage of Rayella's room. Calling it a mess would have been kind. It was a ruin. The servants would doubtlessly think she'd thrown a tantrum come morning. Rayella nuzzled her head into his neck, distracting him from reality. He kissed her forehead, to which she sighed and nuzzled closer. I'll be sore tomorrow. So would he. Naruto would have laughed, had he the energy for it. Instead he flounced back amidst the bed and leaned against Rayella. They lay there in companionable silence for what felt like a small eternity before she grew impatient and tumbled atop him once more. From there she began toying with his necklace, fingers playing with the golden chain and the carefully crafted shard of steel therein. It was a delicate thing, inscribed with a great many seals, the glittering ink of which caught her eye. What's this? A countermeasure. He batted her hand away. Don't touch. She frowned. I thought we weren't keeping secrets from one another. Naruto granted her a wry grin. We're not, I just don't want you setting this off. When faced with the weight of his words, her already pale visage became momentarily pallid. It's that dangerous. Yes. Very well. The queen conceded the point with a huff, but only for a moment. Scooting closer, she nuzzled his nose with hers, delighting in their close proximity to one another. Speaking of secrets, I need to meet that faceless girl of yours. Faceless woman, actually, he corrected her as she embraced him anew. Important distinction, that. Is it, now? She giggled into his shoulder. I wonder what the rest of them are like. You speak so highly of them. Arufal smiled, hugged at the corner of his mouth. Nymeria's tough as nails and great in a fight. Liana's a bit wild, honestly. The two of you would get along. Then there's Elia, bold, brash, but surprisingly kind. Cersei, well, she's a bit of a Tsunere honestly, so if she says anything waspish, she really doesn't mean. Rayella cut him off with a confused noise. Soon what now? Right, you don't know what that word means. He planted a kiss on her collarbone, drawing a pleased shiver from her. I'll explain it someday. Preferably before I meet your lady loves, she sulked into him. My dragon is the smallest among them, I fear I'll be mocked for it. Chome will grow, he reassured her. Quickly, I hope. Naruto considered the sleeping dragon with a keen eye. Somehow, someway, somewhere, Chome had remained blissfully asleep despite it all still perched upon his was larger than Kurama had been when he first hatched. He supposed that spoke for something. Rayella laid a hand on his chest. What troubles you, my love? Many things. Cersei chief among them. He told her of his concerns. Rayella blanched. You left without saying goodbye to your sister. Your own flesh and blood. Naruto kept quiet and pointedly averted his gaze. She smacked his chest. Nathaniel. I didn't have much choice in the matter, ya know. He grumbled back at her. Tywin father all but rushed me out of the rock as soon as we received your message. The queen wasn't having it. She pinched his ear. You must speak to her at the first opportunity. Wounds like that left alone, often faster. My parents had a vicious fight, and when my father passed, things were never properly healed between them. You can reach her in her dreams, can you? He sighed and rolled over. I don't want to talk about Cersei right now. She moved with him and laid her chin on his shoulder, bless her soul. We have been over this, have we not? You may be siblings in blood, but not soul. I fail to see the problem with the two of you coupling. Have you told her your true nature? I have. Good. She laid a kiss on his neck. There is much wrong with the realm at the moment, and my family is much a part of it. See to yours while you still can. Maybe she had a point. I will. Wonderful. She pulled him upright. Now let us speak of more pleasant things. I want you atop me. He guffawed openly. We just went at it for hours. And I am not sated. She granted him an arch look. Are you? Now that he had a chance to catch his breath. No, honestly. She flashed him a dazzling smile and more of her bosom besides as she bid him pin her to the bed. Sensational. Now, fuck me until I can't think straight. I don't plan on walking tomorrow. Laughing, he tumbled over her and pinned her to the bed. She gazed up at him breathlessly, his eyes narrow, a little smile, crossing her lips. Chome awoke with a sudden yawn, ruining the moment. Food. Rayella leaned back with a sigh. Blast it all. Naruto's sigh echoed her own. Blue balled again. Chome had ever been chirpy even as tailed beast, and he was no different as a dragon. Now that he was awake and rested he came bounding over like a curious puppy, wings vibrating against his back. A dragon with 6 wings was a wonder to behold. In terms of color they rather resembled his Biju form. While the outside was a cobalt blue like much of his scales, the underside was a vivid golden green bleeding into red. They looked strong. He hoped he would be. Even if the little bastard had interrupted them. Again. Rayella, for her part, switched gears immediately and opened her arms to the hatchling. Awake, are you? Come here, little one. Mother's right here. Naruto tutted. You're treating him like a baby, ya know. Chome's tail twitched. Of course. Rayella beamed up at him as she took the hatchling up against her breast. This is our child. We hatched him together. He's ours. But wouldn't you rather have an actual child? She preened, and he had the strangest feeling he'd walked into a trap. Well, yes, I'd like one of those as well. How does the name Daenerys strike you? Upside the head. It sounded like destiny, and they had discussed this before, not that he'd remind her. That's a girl's name. How do you know it won't be a boy? She huffed. I have had quite enough Targaryen boys for one lifetime. Softer now, she looked upon him. As have you, I suspect. Of that, she spoke truly. For a fleeting moment, he experienced a vision of her, a young girl with pale skin and silver hair in a blue gown. She would be the best of both them, her little violet blue eyes crinkling as she ran up to him, and reached out for him, face crinkling in a smile when she demanded to be picked up. Papa. U.R.K. He shook his head fiercely to the dispel vision, but the image lingered behind his eyelids when he closed them. Rayella noticed and curled herself around Chome like a mother dragon herself. Very much, then, a merry little giggle fled from her lips as she did so. Aerys will lose his mind. Naruto couldn't quite hold back a rueful chuckle of his own. What's left of it? And what of Rhaegar? What of him? She huffed angrily, tossing her head, ready to spit. We hatched this dragon, not him. My son shall have no claim on it. But if he tries. Her eyes narrowed to slits. Then I shall scratch his eyes out. She was right. There could be no hiding Chome, no taking this back, not here in King's Landing. They could say he hatched in the hearth, as dragons were so often wont to do. Varys might even support such a proposition, given he'd handed the egg over to him in the first place. Take refuge in audacity. The spider had told him he would have what he sought, provided he had the stomach to take it. Maybe he was being too cautious, maybe now it was time for action. A plan came to him just then. He told Rayella of it. By the end, she leaned back, looking equally amused and alarmed. The small council will lose their minds. Do you think such a scheme will work? A dragon hasn't hatched here in King's Landing for decades, if not centuries. They'll be hard-pressed to believe you. It will be the talk of the keep, if not for a while itself. You're a Targaryen, no one should bat an eye. Still, she dithered, Aerys will be furious, assuming he survives. To say nothing of Rhaegar. Good, Naruto snorted. Then perhaps we shall get a better measure of him then. There was much to do. He rose from the bed without thinking. I should go, I need to prepare. Rayella seized his wrist. And where do you think you're going, husband? He frowned down at her. To bed. Her gaze went half-lidded. Yes, you are. She yanked him down and pinned him with her legs, refusing to let him up, even when he protested. If her eyes had been bright before, they were blazing now. Oh, dear. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this? Baring her teeth at him, she shooed Chome out of her grasp, the better to grasp him instead. You are not leaving this room tonight, not until sunrise, nay, till dawn itself. The barest beginnings of a grin touched the corner of his mouth as he let her have her way with him. Is that a command, my wife? Rayella huffed and planted herself atop him, already leaning forward to kiss him once more. It most certainly is, my husband. Chome made an exasperated noise and covered his face with one of his many wings. Naruto laughed helplessly, surrendering to her. As you command, then. There was no sleep that night. Come the dawn, Naruto made his escape. Carefully of course. Disguised as a servant rather than a lord, one could never be too careful. In the red keep he patted Chome's back, placed a quick kiss on Rayella's forehead and then, quietly so as not to wake the queen nor her dragon, slipped out of her chambers. She hadn't let him sleep a jot. In the end she'd been the one to collapse from sheer exhaustion, not he. Uzumaki's stamina was legendary, even in another life. He took pride in that. Thad said, the halls were oddly absent of servants, and ladies in waiting. Moreover, he didn't sense anyone else save Jaime at the door anywhere nearby for that matter. Varys, doing, perhaps. Whatever the case, he wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth and made his good escape. In the end none saw him save Jaime, who took one look at his utterly disheveled state and remarked. Did you even sleep? Naruto granted him a wry grin, winked once, and was gone. From there, he hurriedly hastened back to his own quarters in the keep and made ready. It was a simple matter to lock the door, destroy his disguise, pound his pillow with a fist until it looked like he'd been sleeping, then fling himself down upon the mattress and rest until the servants came in. He didn't wait long. Sometime later, he heard a startled shriek echo down the halls. Seemed the servants had entered Rayella's room and seen the dragon. Rumors would run rampant through the halls soon enough. He knew what would come next and he hid a smile into the pillow as allowed himself to drift off, content to claim what little sleep he could before all hells broke loose. Maybe he could use this chance to speak with Cersei and settle things between the two of them. It was not to be. His sister must have been already awake at this hour or simply busy, because he couldn't reach her, no matter how hard he tried. How unlike her. He knew for a fact that Cersei loved sleeping in, and would at every opportunity. That she hadn't concerned him. He couldn't reach Mother or Tyrion either, which only concerned him all the more. He wound up sleeping restlessly instead, unable to truly slumber, concern twisting in his heart like a gnarled old root. He'd always hated being away from home. Only a few hours into his nap, Jaime banged at the door and awoke him, informing him he'd been summoned for a meeting with the small council. That, at least, was going according to plan. It was so very nice when things did. Naruto dragged on a fresh outfit and fought down a bittersweet smile all the way to the door. Sure enough, his elder brother awaited him on other side, looking somewhat worse for the wear. Right, he'd been given the night watch, hadn't he? Someone must have roused him that, or he decided to deliver this message himself. He felt a fresh upswing of pity at the sight of him. Poor bugger looked like he was about to fall over. Even so, Jaime eyed him curiously. You've got an odd look about you today. What are you up to? Naruto willed his face into a mask of stern composure as he slipped outside. I don't know what you mean. Shouldn't you be getting some sleep? Jaime fell into step with him. I caught a few hours, Nate. I'm fine. Naruto frowned at him over his shoulder. Jaime. I'm just fine. His sibling remained implacable, idly nudging him with an armored elbow. I've not seen your father in years. Can I not spend time with you while you're here? Naruto winced. Well, mostly you. Jamie winked, too wrapped up in nostalgia to notice. Father's just the same as he always was. A few more wrinkles perhaps, and I see you've given him some gray hairs. Naruto couldn't quite contain the bittersweet laugh that leapt from his lips just then. Jamie kept going, blissfully unaware of the fact. How's mother? Her and the rest of the family, he meant. Naruto heard his brothers' unspoken need in and felt his heart lurch anew in guilt. Jamie hadn't seen them in ages. Had any of their letters to him even gotten through? Probably not. Eris was a proper petty bastard. He wouldn't put it past him to have any missives from the rock burned outright. They still had a bit of a walk before they reached the Tower of the Hand where the current small council meeting was being held, he supposed. May as well have a chat. Mother hasn't changed much, that was that. Once he mentioned Joanna he had to tell him about Tyrion, Cersei and all the rest. She still likes to help the castles cook bake those little cakes. The ones with lemon in them. Naruto snapped his fingers. The very same. Jamie sighed wistfully. I miss those. We don't exactly have feasts in the Kingsguard. They're not starving us, mind you. At his alarmed expression he hastened to raise his right hand and reassure him. We eat more modest fare. Bread, cheese and the like. A bit of pheasant here and there. Naruto wrinkled his nose. You should eat with us tonight. Jamie grimaced. I'd like to of course, but you know the rules. Hang the rules. He rounded on him, baring his teeth. You're my brother. If I say you're having supper with us, then you're bloody well having supper with us. In that moment, he couldn't help but notice just how thin his brother looked. You could do with a proper meal. Unwilling to give him a chance to argue, he changed tact on him. Tyrion's taller every day, by the way. Jamie accepted the olive branch for what it was. Is he, now? I was afraid he'd be a dwarf. Naruto clapped him on the back. Not at all. He misses you, ya know. The smallest of smiles tugged at his brother's face. I'm amazed he remembers me at all. He was so young when I left. Well, he did, and he does. Cersei and I have told him all sorts of stories about you. A complicated expression crossed Jaime's gaunt visage. How is she? Naruto made no attempt to hide his smile. Lively and helpful. Jaime's brow shot into his hair. Our sister. He didn't miss the note of disbelief in Jaime's voice. Helpful. Does the sun set in the east and rise in the west now? Naruto elbowed him. A lot's changed since you left. Clearly. What's next? Will you grow a beard? Never. I'd sooner chop off my hand. Careful now. You only have 2 of those. Naruto tutted. And you can only swing a sword with 1, whereas I can with 2. Woe is you. Hey. Gradually, he found himself warming to their banter as they climbed the stairs leading to the Tower of the Hand. It was so easy to forget that years really had passed since he'd seen Jamie last. His brother had willingly offered himself up as a means to both deflect and distract Eris, but the truth of the matter was he hadn't thought about him over much in quite some time now. The occasional parting thought, yes, but little beyond that. He'd been so consumed by his sordid schemes and potential plots as of late too busy rearing dragons and making ready for war that he'd seldom thought of his older brother. He hadn't meant to ignore Jamie, but there was always something else to worry about. The thought shamed him. He clasped his brother's forearm. I'm sorry we couldn't come for you sooner. Don't be. Jamie tousled his hair like the boy he no longer was. The first year was rough, I admit, but the atmosphere's improved as of late. That would be your doing, brother. The words were left unsaid. Naruto batted his hand down and nudged him back. If you say so. He supposed things had improved with the Mad King's absence. There was a lightening of the air, and the servants didn't seem quite so fearful of having their tongues cut out. Insanity aside, Eris wouldn't live much longer, even if he was freed from Duskendale's dungeons. He'd already lost an arm, a leg, and an eye to his mysterious illness, not to mention various other bits of himself besides. Bastard was probably still flaying himself bloody scratching even now, wherever the Darklands had stashed him. Such a horrid thing, wasn't it, this disease of his? Such a pity none could find a cure. Such a shame, truly. Naruto would take the secret of it to his grave. He'd taken a risk in inflicting Eris knowing he might spread the contagion to others in the early days, but thankfully the act paid off in spades. Not only had he hastened the Mad King's downfall in the days leading up to his capture, but he'd made everyone afraid to so much as touch him without gloves. Even assuming he was rested from the dungeons in the months to come, his madness would only be exacerbated by his captivity. He was supposedly a lunatic already, who knew what he would like now. The man would have an absolute fit once he returned. If he returned. All they needed was for him to make one wrong move, and in doing so, overtly act against them. Once that happened. Calling it a coup sounded so very gauche, but he couldn't find any other word for it. Already, much of the path had been cleared. Rayella was firmly on their side. Visories had been removed from the board altogether, though he found the act distasteful, which only left Rhaegar as the last remaining obstacle, one that would be removed just as soon as they found the opportunity. It was almost a shame. Rhaegar meant, well, really, he did. In another life, they might have become fast friends. Anyone who relied upon the power of prophecy and listened to the whispers of old crones could not be trusted with the realm. As a soldier, yes, a noble, perhaps, but not as a prince, and certainly not the king. And who was to say he wouldn't become another heiress? No one. The prince was half daft already, just as his father had been in his youth. He'd be the first to admit his reasons were personal, ever since the near disaster at Castle Rock. He touched my sister. He laid his hands on her. He dies. And it had to be death, didn't it? They could hardly afford to exile him, not when he might return with an army at his back. Once the mad dragon and his son were toppled, Rhaella would declare him her husband. They could bring the dragons out of hiding and everything would fall into place. Of course, there was no telling whether or not this truly would work. The realm might revolt. They were so close to the endgame now, so very close, but things could go either way. They had to be safe, had to be certain, had to be sure. Jaime flicked the back of his head, jarring him painfully. Lost in your thoughts again, are we? Naruto blinked, drawn from his reverie by those words. His brother must have been talking for quite some time to resort to that. Quote. Just thinking, he muttered under his breath. Jaime prodded him. What about the future? He gestured to the sweeping halls stretching before them as they cleared the stairs. Do you ever get used to all this? Not really, no, his brother replied. In truth, I'll be glad to see the back of it. Naruto nearly tripped on the spot. Father's releasing you from your vows. That would certainly be explosive, to say the least. Not as such, Jaime hedged. At least not yet. Naruto could imagine why. Plans within plans, plots within plots, ploy after ploy. Aerys was finally out of the capital for the first time in forever, and in his absence, Tywin held almost all the power as Hand of the King. Why not free Jaime now while they could? Father must have a reason for keeping Jaime on TBIS, God's forsaken place. Keeping Jaime close to Aerys hobbled the Lannisters, yes, gave the king a hostage to use against them in the event they rebelled, but what if one considered the opposite? As Kingsguard, Jaime was closest to the king at all hours of the day. He was a hostage, yes, but an armed hostage, one supremely skilled with a blade. Aerys was feeble and weak. If, by some miracle, he returned to King's Landing and this farce escalated into war, it would only take a single thrust of a sword to end his life. An awful thought dawned. One almost too horrible to bear. Kingslayer. Oathbreaker. Man without honor. Was that Tywin's intention? No, no, no. Naruto held up a hand both to forestall that awful thought as well as an explanation on his brother's part. Don't tell me. It's best if I don't know. After all, knights seemed honorable when honor was called into question, but how did one defend the honor of a mad king? A man who burned his enemies, spewed obscenities, slaughtered anyone who dared stand against him. A king so hated that one of his own vassals kidnapped him. How did you defend a man like that? Answer. You didn't. He instead focused on the task at hand, because next came the matter of Chome. Truth be told, he had considered informing Tywin and Jaime of him beforehand, but ultimately decided against doing so. It was a necessary deception on his part. His father needed to seem surprised like the rest, lest he fall under suspicion of doing something untoward. No, in the end, he would be just as shocked as the rest. Jaime, doubly so. He wanted to surprise him. At least now he'd get see his reaction firsthand. At long last, the door awaited. Jaime quirked a brow. Shall we, little brother? Naruto elbowed him. I'm nearly as tall as you now. Only nearly. Jaime cocked his head. Is that a new measurement? I wasn't aware of it. Gods, but he'd missed him. Sweeping into the room, he entered and took a seat near the head of the table with Jaime watching his back. No one dared protest this time. Idly he noticed a few changes this time around. Or rather, Absences. Carlton Chelstead and Orden Merriweather were the same as ever, alongside Varys and Pycelle. Lord John Connington's absence was immediately noted, as was the lack of Sir Gerald Hightower. Sir Barristan Selmy was present however, which suggested a deliberate slight on the Lord Commander's part, only furthering his distaste for them. He'd no idea where Connington had gone, nor why the supposed Master of Laws was deliberately flouting this meeting, but if he thought to curry favor by doing so he was sorely mistaken. Tywin Lannister had no patience for idiots nor fools, and he'd begun to think Lord Connington was both. And speaking of fools, Selmy looked at Jaime and coughed pointedly into a fist. Jaime granted him a roguish grin and absolutely refused to acknowledge the issue. "Are you unwell, Sir Lannister?" The older man sighed, dragging his family name out. "You're in the wrong place again." For crying out loud. Naruto felt his already tempered dislike of the legendary knight harden into diamond. The man might be one of the most skilled swordsmen this side of Westeros, but he was such a boor when it came to oaths and honor. Promises were meant to be kept certainly, but there came a point where common sense should prevail over hidebound precepts. And right now Barristan wasn't being sensible at all. What harm was there in letting Jaime stand by his side? Hadn't he suffered enough, after all this? But no, Barristan had to cling to his outdated concept of honor, consequences be damned, because that was the only way he knew how to be. To think, he'd admired this man once, wanted to be just like him, what a fool he was. In his anger, his tongue betrayed him. "How skilled are you with that sword, Selmy?" The small council went still. Barristan bristled. "I beg your pardon, Sir." Jaime muttered, "Don't," under his breath, but that wasn't enough to stop him. "Your sword." Naruto swore inwardly at himself even as he uttered the words, because it truly was too late to take them back now. He was risking everything simply for his brother's honor, but the plan suddenly held very little meaning to him now, because a black rage had awakened in him, and with it a red thirst for retribution. He wouldn't be denied by anyone short of Tywin himself, and father wasn't here. "How many battles have you won with that blade?" Barristan's rigid expression loosened somewhat as he gazed down at the weapon in question. After a moment's pause he laid a hand on his trusty partner's hilt and turned contemplative. "More than I count." "I can empathize." Naruto granted him a shallow nod. "There comes a point where you've killed so many that the number ceases to matter, when the lives of men become little more than crumbs of bread." Barristan frowned at the bite in his words, but this time, Naruto didn't give him the chance for a rebuttal. He burst to his feet, unsheathed Red Rain's sword and stabbed her down into the table with a horrible crunch. The blade bit deep. Valyrian steel always did. She sank a solid 3 inches into the oaken table and would have cut clean through to the other side had he let her. Instead he stopped short for effect. "Red Rain." He laid a hand upon the crimson sword and tore her free, letting all see the shimmering Valyrian steel therein. "She's no Brightroar, but she's served me well these last 2 years." The sword was simultaneously both symbol and spectacle alike, a reminder of the great Greyjoy gallows and the drowning of House Drum besides. All eyes were drawn to it, and not solely for the rarity of said Valyrian steel at that. This blade had a most bloody history, even long before it came to him. Pycelle puttered, "A fine trophy, my lord." "Thank you, Grand Maester." He granted the old man a limpid smile before looking back to Barristan. "Does your sword have a name, Selmy?" "All the best blades do." Jaime snorted behind him, guessing his game. He'd always been a clever one. The rest of the small council, even Varys, wisely remained silent, and well that they did, because he would have absolutely stabbed them for insulting his big brother. "My sword has no name." Barristan relented at last, bowing his head mildly. "I find it reliable all the same." As though the sword were just a hunk of metal. A mere tool. Valyrian steel had a mind of its own, some might even say it was alive. Perhaps it was, in a sense. Lighter than traditional weapons, any weapon made with it was perfectly balanced, an extension of the wielder's will, one that moved with you when you attacked. It could cut through nearly everything, required rigorous maintenance with special tools, and yet despite all that, Red Rain had never once failed him in a fight. Normal steel buckled and bent. But this steel, this scarlet sword, hadn't let him down. He suspected it never would. Sir Barristan Selmy would never know the intrinsic joy of wielding such a weapon, because it was becoming increasingly clear that was what he'd become. Not just a weapon, but a tool for those he deemed his masters, his honor a blunted blade in their hands. Or in this case, those of the Targaryen dynasty. How incredibly disappointing. Something hot and angry ignited deep within his chest. "And I find your lack of faith disturbing," he countered, sneering at Barristan in an insouciant manner that would have made the rogue prince himself proud. "Tell me, how do you live while honoring that hidebound code of yours? It must be terribly inconvenient, given your position." Barristan squared his shoulders and lifted his chin to stare him down. "You dare question my honor?" In that instant, Naruto accepted a fundamental truth. He would never be anything like this man. Indeed, he'd been a foolish child to ever aspire toward such a goal. How could they ever be alike? Barristan believed himself to be honorable, and perhaps in his mind he was, because he kept to his oaths. His hands were clean. Naruto's arms, meanwhile, were steeped in blood, fingers and palms all, soaked to the wrists in the lives of the innocent and guilty alike. They would never be clean again. He accepted that. Life wasn't so black and white as honor would dictate. There was gray, too. So much gray. He'd made mistakes. He could be honest about that. But Barristan, I question everything about you. He flourished Red Rain at Selmy over the table at him and set its pommel against his shoulder, uncaring as Merryweather and Chelsted flinched back in their seats when the blade came perilously close to their faces. What happened to the boy who donned borrowed armor and entered that tourney at Blackhaven as a mystery knight? The one who fought Prince Duncan himself. His words forced a flinch from the older knight. Where did Barristan the Bold go? Another wince from the man, bordering on an outright grimace now. Still, he pressed the attack. When did you lose sight of yourself? He all but bit off the last word with a snarl. You make claims of honor, you preach of goodness, but know nothing of it. You have siblings yourself. A true knight wouldn't give a damn if I wanted to spend a few more seconds with my brother, who, I remind you, I haven't seen in years. Jamie laid a hand on his shoulder and calm flooded back in like cleansing water. Gods, but he hated this place. Rayella was the only good thing about it. Breathe, he reminded himself. Calm down, if only for her sake. Naruto exhaled, releasing his anger in a burst of breath. Tell you what, he ground out, since you seem to take issue with where my brother stands, why don't we make a game of it, then? He let the words hang between them, the moment stretching to its zenith. And then, just before Barristan could ask what he was after, he beat him to the punch. Let's have ourselves a duel. If you manage to best me, my brother will stand beside you. He scoffed at the very notion. But when I win, and I will, Jamie is free to stand where he pleases. Barristan looked like he'd bitten into a lemon. You would have us fight for such a paltry thing. Everyone grimaced at those last three words. Varys tutted in agreement of his own. Unwise. Naruto inhaled angrily through his nose. Paltry, is it? Jamie groaned into his dominant hand. You fucking idiot. Naruto flung himself forward across the table without so much as a sound, crossing the distance between him and Barristan in an instant. The Elder Knight didn't even have a chance to defend himself, much less draw his sword in time before scarlet steel found his throat. He stopped just shy of carving a red smile in his neck. Even then it was near thing. Red Rain's deadly edge touched the man's jugular vein and drew a bead of blood from the skin therein. He stood there atop the table, looming over him, ready to lop his head off, the moment stretching out into eternity as he held Barristan at bay. You're mad, the knight balked. You can't possibly think you'll get away with something like this. He could have killed him in that instant. Perhaps he should, consequences be damned. But if he did, everything would be ruined. If he killed Barristan now, in cold blood, it would all fall apart. He would have no choice but to flee. Never mind Tywin, Rayella would be utterly distraught if he did. Not just her, but Nymeria and Lyanna as well, then Elia, even Cersei. The thought of their tear-stained faces flashed through his mind, and in that end, that ultimately decided things, not his rage for Jaime's sake, but his own innate selfishness. Inhaling deeply, he stepped back, bounded off the table, and reluctantly sheathed his sword. The bonds of family are no paltry matter to me, unlike you. He affixed Selmy with a smoldering look, one hand still resting on the blade's hilt. You'd do well to remember that before you insult my family again. Age may bring skill, but youth brings speed and strength. Barristan bit his tongue, but bowed his head. Understood. Lovely. Naruto flung a handkerchief at him and indicated the man's neck. Best clean that before it gets infected. Barristan did so hastily. As he did, Naruto's gaze flicked down to the man's sword, still silent in its sheath. Anger burned in his heart like dragon's breath, and this time, he didn't bother to quash it. On second though, let's have that duel today. He needed to knock this man down a peg or he'd never be satisfied. We can take it to the practice yard once we're done here. Jamie preened behind him, basking in the byplay. A sound idea, brother. Better to cross swords there where no one can get hurt. Naruto grinned. Or we could have it now with live steel. Battling with blunted blades isn't any fun, wouldn't you agree? He saw Barristan take the measure of him anew, ready and willing to fight despite the latter being in full plate while he wore nothing but cloth. Suddenly the swordsman didn't look quite so sure of himself. Confidence became quiet caution and caution withered into concern as he looked on. He'd rattled him. Good. Maybe a defeat would knock some sense into that thick skull of his. He was itching for some action anyway, even if it had to be here. Cease. It was not to be, not in this moment at least. Tywin stormed through the door and took his seat at the head of the table with a grim look. That was all it took to quell the fire burning in his gut. For if he was an inferno then the man was ice, cold and unyielding, utterly unmoved by their squabbles. He glared at the lot of them like a disappointed parent. At length, he sighed. If you must have at one another, wait until we've finished here. Until then, we have business to conduct. Shelstead sputtered to life, craven as ever, the coward. We were waiting for Lord Connington. Father remained implacable. If he is not here, then he is late, and if he is late, then he has no business being a part of this council. The lords flinched, cowed by his words. Naruto exchanged a rueful glance with Jamie, trying his utmost not to laugh. It was always incredibly entertaining watching father work. He considered himself to have something of a silver tongue, but whereas he'd put most of his focus into persuasion by force if need be, Tywin was a master of intimidation through words alone. A single glare from him could make anyone short of the king reconsider their words. Truly, he was learning from the master here. And you, Tywin turned on him next with said stern look. Keep that sword sheathed in this room. Unless you'd rather pay for another table. Naruto glanced down to deep cut he'd made in the oaken wood. Whoops, he knew when to play the dutiful son and bowed his head. As you say, father. Good, Tywin granted him a nod. Let's continue, then. Merryweather wrung his hands fretfully, eager to change the subject. And the queen, you did say she should be a part of these meetings. I've sent a servant to ensure just that. Her grace will be joining us shortly, I suspect. Naruto fought down a sly, satisfied smile and reclaimed his seat. One could hope. Tywin granted him a stern look, but subsided when he didn't protest. Very well. Now, as to the matter of this year's taxes, I've come to a decision. We shall lower the amount given to the capital this year. Shelstead sneered at that, glad to be in his element once more. Lower them? Preposterous. Better to raise them instead. The crown needs all the coin it can get. Tywin arched a golden brow. I was unaware that Eris was in debt to the Iron Bank. Shelstead sniffed impudently. We are not, but our coffers are flush, Lord Hand. Merryweather reassured him. Never better, in fact. Shelstead hissed an imprecation at him like a scalded cat. We weren't supposed to tell him that. Varys sighed. Lord Tywin cannot do his job if he doesn't know the state of the realm, you know this. Naruto's lip curled. Such pointless backbiting. Tywin nodded. In that case, there should be no problem going without taxes this year. Shelstead looked like he'd been struck across the face. Without, he stammered, all but stumbling over the word. As in none, Pycelle supplied, taking great pleasure in the lesser lord's squirming. One would think you would know the meaning of the word given your station. Merryweather raised his hands in a faux shrug and shook his head. Gambling debts, I'm afraid. He's not very good at managing money. Quite, Tywin tutted in return before looking back to the master of coin. The realm is riven with strife, you idiot. The insult forced a flinch from the lesser lord and a shared smirk from his sons. We may well go to war with Duskendale for this foolishness. Eliminating the capital's taxes outright this year will do much to set the small folk at ease. Left unsaid was the fact that it would weaken King's Landing for a time, and by definition, the Targaryens. But these grasping lords with their grubby fingers didn't need to know that now, did they? Shelstead bridled beneath the insults, rather reminding Naruto of a surly horse refusing to be saddled. I am master of coin, not you, and I say. The doors opened behind them, cutting him off mid-tirade. Rayella entered at that very moment. If Naruto hadn't known better, he would have thought she was listening in, waiting for an opportunity. Whatever the case, she'd chosen both her timing and attire well. Today she stood resplendent in a shoulder-bearing gown featuring the colors of her house. It was a rich, flowing thing, not so long as to impede her should she need to move quickly, but eye-catching all the same. Gods, he was amazed she could walk straight after last night. And there, perched atop her right shoulder like a proud baby hawk, the shining jewel of her ensemble, craning his neck this way and that to glance about the room like a curious newborn. Chome. As he looked on, the baby Biju dragon spread all 6 of his wings wide and cried out. Scree, scree, skreeee tilde. Boya shits tilde. To say the small council was startled would have been an understatement. Merryweather and Chelsted sprang to their feet with a startled shout, Barristan balked, Pycelle turned white as a sheet, and Varys, well, he never could really read that bastard's expressions, but he sensed a rare flicker of surprise from him nonetheless. He probably hadn't expected Chome to hatch quite so quickly or look like that. Tywin simply stared. Naruto forced himself to look surprised as well, all the while biting back a laugh. Jaime had one hand on the hilt of his sword, but a stern look from father quelled him. He reluctantly pried his fingers from the blade and stared at the little miracle. Gods be good. They have been indeed, Raella preened, claiming the seat opposite him, directly next to Naruto. Hello, my lords, she granted them all a nod, heedless of their stupefaction. You look well today. Her gaze settled on him and lingered just a little longer than was strictly appropriate. Lord Lannister. His gaze drifted to the ring on her finger, deftly hidden within her curled fist. My but she was being bold today. Playing a dangerous game there, wife of mine. He schooled his face into an impassive mask and bowed his head briefly in return. Your Grace. For a moment he thought she might vault the table to take him then and there. The thought warmed him in more ways than one. I see Lord Connington is absent today, she continued apropos of nothing, glancing past him to the sole empty seat in the room. Has something befallen him? Naruto passed the proverbial baton to Jaime with but a glance and his brother took it up with a bow, bless him. I believe he is unwell, Your Grace. A pity. Her eyes narrowed, albeit briefly. No matter, shall we begin? Merryweather gawked, raising a trembling finger to indicate the creature upon her shoulder. Is that a bloody dragon? Raella tossed her head, idly tucking a stray strand of pale silver hair behind one ear. Why, so it is. How astute of you to notice. Credit where it was due, Tywin recovered next. How did you come by such a marvel, Your Grace? Oh, dear, Naruto knew that tone. Father was furious. I often collect curiosities these days. Raella played her part well, idly reaching back to stroke Chome's head to draw a pleased trill from the baby Biju beast. Lord Varys was kind enough to procure this little one's egg for me. I was fortunate to have it hatch in my hearth just last night. All eyes turned to Varys. Naruto held his breath, bracing for betrayal. With but a word, the spider could damn their cause to destruction. His entire body tensed like a coiled spring, ready to leap into action. He needn't have worried. The eunuch placed both hands with his sleeves and bowed his head. Indeed, my lady, it seems fortune favors us this day. Pycelle muttered something that sounded vaguely disparaging and exasperated others weren't quite so quiet with their tongues. Fortune, Chelsted sputtered, craven as ever. The beast is a mutant. We should kill it. Raella rounded on him, pale visage thunderous. I beg your pardon, Esser. It's an abomination. The master of coin hissed back at her. An affront to the gods. Just look at it. Chome hissed at him. The queen's face darkened further still. You forget yourself. Hold your tongue. Tywin could have intervened then, said something, shouted the fool down, cowed him into silence. And yet he did not. Naruto had a sinking suspicion as to why. I will not. Sure enough, Lord Chelsted thrust a finger at Chome, blind to his own peril. Dragons are extinct. The world has seen the end of them and good riddance. In his fit of incandescent ire, he failed to notice many of his fellow counselors edging away from him as he spoke. The last thing we need is an uncontrollable monster like that flying about, doing as it pleases. Barristan barked at him. Control yourself, man. You address the queen. Chelsed snarled back. Be silent. I shall be heard. Too late. Chome lunged forward and bit the screaming lord's finger off at the knuckle, tearing it free with a horrible crunch. Blood went everywhere. Some of it spattered across Raella's face, not that she seemed to care. Chelsted recoiled with a pained squeal and staggered backwards, clutching his bloodied hand in pure shock. Merryweather looked like he might faint at the sight. Varys looked on impassively. Pycelle's face had gone an ashen shade of gray to match his beard. All the while, Tywin said not a word. Chome hissed out a laugh as he chomped Chelsted's finger down, devouring it in an instant. Scraw, tastes like chicken tilde. The gaunt lord went for his belt knife. See, it's feral. It must die. Feral, you say? Rayella stared him down, utterly uncaring for his cries. Would you care to repeat that, my lord? Naruto leaned forward in his seat, eager to see what his wife would do next. Rayella didn't disappoint. The crown thanks you for your service, Lord Chelsted. There was an icy finality in the queen's eyes now, a biting quality to her words that he knew all too well. You are hereby released from service. The man blanched, realizing his peril. My queen, I only meant. She didn't give him a chance to finish. Dracarys. Chome spread all 6 wings, arched his neck and spat a plume of green fire at the lord's chest. Chelsted never stood a chance. He was too close, too wounded, too unprepared. Napalm struck him center mass and spread faster than wildfire. He tried to smother it with his palms, but that proved a mistake. The fire was quick to leap to his hands and sleeves, consuming those as well. What followed wasn't pretty. Naruto had never seen a human burn before, not up close, not like this. Dragonflame burned fast and hot like nothing else, eclipsing even wildfire itself. In a matter of moments the poor man was set entirely ablaze. Any plea for mercy the man might have made was subsequently swallowed in the inferno. He watched Chelsted flail in the flames and smothered a faint flicker of guilt in his heart for the poor fellow. Fire was a bad way to go. Yet this was necessary, all part of the plan, a means to an end. Rayella's actions here today would help build her own reputation away from the pervasive shadow of Eris. He knew this must pain her. She was a gentle soul. She didn't like to hurt others. She abhorred violence. And yet kindness would not stir these lords. Fear would. It was a simple fact of life. He and Rayella had known someone would object today, but not who. Said someone was destined to die. Frankly, he'd already known who wouldn't speak out against them. Varys was much too smart to make himself a target, and Pycelle would remain calm so long as Tywin did, which, of course, he would. Likewise, Merryweather was too much a sycophant to the Targaryen cause to ever dare speak out against them. Furthermore, the so-called Kingsguard were too beholden to the king to ever rise against his family. In truth, he'd suspected John Connington would be the pawn on the pyre, but it seemed someone, Nymeria most likely, had gotten to him first. Lord Carlton Chelsted would serve just as well. As he looked on, the burning lord fell to the floor with an anguished cry and writhed there amidst the stone, desperately seeking to extinguish the fire consuming him with increasingly feeble efforts. Against all odds, he survived the ordeal, likely in part because Chome was still freshly hatched. Had any other dragon directed their breath at him, he would have been ashes by now. Such would have been a quicker death, merciful even, some might say. Naruto idly wondered if the arrogant lord might yet live the day, if one could call it living with those horrific burns. Or so he thought, right up until Chome crawled across the table, moved to the edge, and looked down on Chelsted. The badly burnt lord raised a blackened hand to fend him off, words a raspy whisper. No. Chome looked to Rayella, awaiting her command, life or death. The room held its breath. Dracarys. Rayella intoned solemnly once more, sealing the master of coin's fate. Chome's long neck whipped around as he shrieked green flame for a second time upon his prey, consuming him anew. Chelsted shrieked pitifully in the blaze, a high reedy wail that soon tapered off into a gurgling gasp as he slumped onto the stone floor. Rayella rose from her chair and circled round the table to stand beside his lifelessly smoldering body. Looking down on him, and in full view of the other lords, she issued another command. Kisalbar. Wait, wasn't that High Valyrian for feast? Chome pounced on the smoldering corpse and did just that, tearing into him with gusto as the lords looked on. It wasn't quiet, wasn't pretty, either. He supposed that was the point. She had a statement to make, and the only language these lords understood was violence. Let it be violence, then. Barristan knelt before Rayella and bowed his head. What is your will, my queen? Naruto narrowly resisted the urge to strangle the man on the spot. Turning away from her hungry dragon, Rayella smiled at the lot of them, uncaring for the blood on her face. Naruto felt his heart swell at the sight, watching her step out of Eris, shadow and truly come into her own. It would appear we have a vacancy in this council. She smiled demurely. Would anyone care to serve as master of coin in Lord Chelsted's stead? No one volunteered. Unsurprising. Merryweather had fainted dead away in his seat. Varys and Pycelle clearly wanted no part of it. By the law of the land, Barristan and Jaime couldn't take it, and Tywin was already hand of the king. Seemed they'd have to recruit someone else. And then Rayella rounded on him. Lord Nathaniel, will you take up this burden until such a time as another is chosen? This time, Naruto's surprise was genuine. Wait, what, was that part of the plan? He didn't remember that being part of the plan. Was she testing him? I'm not certain I should. My son accepts, Tywin answered for him without missing a beat. He shall serve you faithfully, your grace. Naruto hissed out an angry breath at his father. He'd be having words with him later. Excellent. The queen clapped her hands and preened as she returned to her seat. Shall we continue? I believe we were discussing abolishing taxes this year. Tywin warmed to the subject immediately. We were, your grace. This time, none dared object. Tywin wasn't happy. In all fairness, Naruto knew his father wouldn't be best pleased with the given situation or him at the moment, not after the spectacular surprise he'd sprung, but there was simply nothing he could do about it. Any attempt to mitigate the man's anger would have ruined everything. His shock and likewise ire was a necessary sacrifice to divert suspicions from the Lannisters, and he considered that a worthy sacrifice even if it left Tywin angry. As such, he wasn't surprised when everyone left him to his father's less than tender mercies. Indeed, the moment the small council meeting concluded, he found himself cornered and commanded to stay while the others desperately departed, making their excuses. Merryweather stumbled out looking like he'd seen a ghost. Hycel mumbled something about writing to the citadel, while Varys gave him a pitying look, no doubt well aware of the tongue lashing he was about to receive. Jaime proved particularly quick to duck out of the room. Then again, he and Barristan did have a corpse to remove. What was left of one, anyway? Chome had eaten well. In the end, Rhaella was ultimately the last to leave. She lingered close with a smile, resplendently content, but not daring to touch him in public lest someone comment upon it. He didn't miss how she kept rubbing the ring he'd given her. Here in this moment she looked like the young queen she was meant to be, free from the shadow of her family. Master of Coin, she all but hummed his new title. I look forward to discussing matters of the realm with you in the future. He fought down a pleasant shiver. Gods, but she wasn't even trying to hide it, was she? So long as she didn't make any overt actions in public, he supposed she could get away with it. Few would dare question her before, and even less now after today's stunt with Chome. Dragonfire had a way of winning arguments where words and swords could not. Some would anyway, he knew. A scant few might actually succeed. King's Landing was no Castle Rock where he and Tywin controlled everything. It was unsafe. Belatedly it occurred to him that he should probably teach her how to defend herself in the future. Probably a good idea, that. Kingsguard were all well and good, but even Jaime couldn't stop every knife in the dark. After all, it would only take one reckless. Are you displeased, my love? Rhaella launched into High Valyrian suddenly, surprising him. You look upset. Naruto coughed into a fist, hastily rallying himself once he realized they were safe. As an ancient dialect few within Westeros spoke these days save the Targaryen's heiress had certainly seen to that the fact Rhaella she was speaking in her native tongue immediately displayed her desire for discretion. Not even Tywin spoke it all that well, though he suspected the latter was out of spite for the Mad King as opposed to an inability to learn. Now there was an idea, maybe teach Rhaella his language. He could try. Husband. He'd gotten lost in his own head again, damn it. By the look of her, she was on the verge of reaching out to touch him, and that, he couldn't allow. Not in public at least. Not yet. Wife. He retorted in flawless Valyrian of his own, reveling in the sudden delight that flashed across her face when he said the word, and no, I'm not angry at you. I just didn't expect you to saddle me with a position on your small council. Rhaella tilted her head. Would you prefer master of ships? Or perhaps laws? He chuckled ruefully. I'd rather have none if it's all the same to you. Nonsense. She clicked her tongue at him, youthfully defiant. I would reward you for your service, and I have little else to give you. Lordship aside, you already possess power beyond reckoning and a Valyrian steel blade besides. What more could I give you? You've already give me yourself. That's the greatest gift of all. It was the right thing to say. Rhaella squirmed under his gaze, legs rubbing together. Will you visit me again tonight, my heart? She granted him a lingering look, causing him to flush deeper with each passing instant. I long for you. I want to touch you, as I want to be touched in return. I want your hands on me. I want you inside me. By the end, the back of his neck burned red like roses. He bowed his head to hide it and switched back to the common tongue, ending their conversation before either of them did something foolish. As my queen commands. She preened and held out her hand to him. You may kneel. Naruto knelt, took a hold of her hand, and deftly brought it to his lips, delivering a firm kiss to her knuckles. I live to serve. Rayella shivered most pleasantly. Her violet eyes went half-lidded. I expect great things of you, my lord. Though the road may be long and hard, I'm sure you'll rise to the occasion. Long and hard, rise to the occasion, wicked, wanton woman. Behind them, Tywin coughed into a fist, disrupting both his thoughts and their discussion alike. I would speak with my son alone, your grace. He expected a flash of annoyance from her, and was surprised to see her smile. But of course, old friend, I'll leave you to it. So speaking, she departed, closing the door behind her. Tywin sat at his desk. Naruto likewise rose from his crouch but made no attempt to sit, nor was he offered a chair. He expected neither. The opening gambit was his to make, so make it he did with a raised brow. Old friend, Tywin did not blush, he never did, he'd begun to think the man was incapable of it. A story for another time. The queen has a dragon. Even now he chose his words with care. King's Landing had entirely too many eyes and ears for his liking, even with Varys and his little birds on their side. One never knew who might be lurking in the halls, or indeed, if there were secret passages within said walls. So she does. You anticipated this. It wasn't an accusation on Tywin's part, but rather a statement. Naruto shrugged.